Chapter 619. Yi Xiaowu. Gu Fei repeated this guy's name. The incident with the Prophecy Emperor seemed to be directed at Silvermoon and Non-Smiler. It didn't pose any threat to Gu Fei. This guy said that he wanted to get along with Gu Fei, but after a few exchanges, there was no movement. Until now, Gu Fei hadn't faced him directly. The more it was like this, the more Gu Fei felt that this person was definitely planning something. He didn't make a move, but once he did, it would be like a thunderbolt. This also seemed to be a form of persistence. Gu Fei thought as he entered the game. It was 3 a.m. on the 3rd of March. An hour later, the teaching work at the White Mill would begin. According to the rules of the temporary workers, they had to complete all the teaching work before they could be considered to have finished. When he went online, he scanned his friends list. Those who should be there were there, and those who shouldn't were there. Gu Fei grabbed the two students and scolded them. Under the threat of 8,000 meters, the two students resentfully went offline after a few minutes. Then, he received a message from the reporter, Duo Mu. This guy had been waiting for Gu Fei for a whole day, and finally, Gu Fei came online. It turned out that he wanted to follow up on Gu Fei's teaching work at the White Mill. Duo Mu and Mudua's objective reporting and praise of Kung Fu made Gu Fei have a good impression of these two reporters. After asking for the opinions of the elite group, he agreed to Duo Mu's request. "See you at the East Gate." Gu Fei replied to Duo Mu. At this time, Sword Demon, Jiannan, and the others were already heading over. Although the students were divided into 4 groups, each group had 10,000 people. It was quite difficult to organize them. Moreover, this wasn't a guild or a mercenary group. 10,000 people would have 10,000 voices. How to unify 10,000 people was a challenge. At the East City Gate, Gu Fei met with Duo Mu and Mudua. Both of them were quite excited about getting the chance to be interviewed. At the same time, they didn't forget to remind Gu Fei that they had also registered. Gu Fei was startled. Speaking of which, if the two of them hadn't reminded him, he would have forgotten that they had registered and paid their tuition fees. When they walked out of the East Gate and looked to the right, they could already see a dense crowd. It was currently 3:34 p.m., but it was clear that many players had arrived at the gathering point ahead of time. Gu Fei and Duo Mudua walked over together. His freshness was no less than that of the two reporters. He guessed that the others might have already done a lot of preparation work in advance. Anyway, he had been a hands-off shopkeeper for the whole day and did not care about anything. Gu Fei did not feel any burden in his heart. He had only received 40,000 gold coins in total. Who would dare to poke fun at him? As they walked closer, Gu Fei saw that all the players were gathered together. There seemed to be a raised platform in the middle. The Han family young master and brother Yu were standing in the middle. They seemed to be saying something, but Gu Fei and the others could not hear them at this distance. Gu Fei asked in the channel, "What are they talking about?" But no one responded. The 3 of them were now at the outermost edge of the circle. Gu Fei did not know if he should squeeze in or wait somewhere else. On the raised platform in the circle, he could see the Han family young master and brother Yu. The others said that they had arrived, but he did not know where they were. Just as he was feeling helpless, a message from brother Yu suddenly popped up in the channel. "Damn, I should have put a number on the letter earlier. It would have been much more convenient." "Yes, I must do that next time," Sword Demon replied. "What's the situation?" Gu Fei hurriedly seized the opportunity to ask. "It's more or less under control. You don't have to worry about it. Go directly to the White Mill and prepare." Brother Yu said. "Oh." Gu Fei did not care about what happened and was ready to leave. However, Duo Mu and Mudua, the two reporters, needed to do in-depth reporting. They decided to stay and interview more about the situation here before following the rest to the White Mill. The 3 of them immediately separated. As Gu Fei left, he saw that on the raised platform in the middle of the circle, brother Yu had suddenly put up a large sign. On it were 2 large words, "Quiet." Then he raised the sign and walked around to let the players in all directions see it clearly. It was really like an etiquette lady in a boxing ring. After leaving the gathering place, Gu Fei went straight to the White Mill. Compared to the excitement of the previous day, the White Mill was now a bit calmer. In addition to the fact that it was late at night, there was no sea of people like the day before. However, the players who were leveling still looked around from time to time as if they were expecting something to happen. As soon as Gu Fei arrived, he saw Bai Jingluan, Jian Nanyu, and the others gathered next to a mill discussing something. Gu Fei sent a message to Bai Jingluan. A group of people looked over and also saw Gu Fei. "You're finally here." A few people shouted. Gu Fei walked closer and saw that everyone was sweating profusely. He did not know what they had done. "What happened?" Gu Fei asked. "Nothing much, just tired. Ordering people around is more tiring than ordering things. At least if you tell an item to go east, it will not go west. Even if it's wrong, it's your mistake. But ordering people around, if you tell them to go east, they will go west. It can really anger people to death." Jian Nanyu said angrily. "What's wrong?" "When I came over, the situation over there was good. It took more than half an hour to control the situation." Jian Nanyu said. "Oh. What happened?" "Actually, it's nothing much. It's just that there are too many people and there are too many mouths. The information can't be spread out and we can't coordinate." Jian Nanyu said. "Then what did you do in the end? What else can we do?" "Tell them one by one and arrange them one by one. It wasn't easy to organize everyone." Then, that Han family young master came up with an idea. Everyone formed a circle and he stood in the middle. Then, he would say something and everyone would spread it verbally. Then, those who heard it clearly would squat down. Those who didn't hear it would ask those who squat down. When everyone heard it clearly, wouldn't they all squat down? Then, he would say the next sentence. After that, those who heard it clearly would stand up. Those who didn't hear it clearly would ask those who were standing. Those who heard it clearly would all stand up again. And so on and so forth until everything was said clearly. Jian Nanyu said. "I didn't see this activity when I came over." Gu Fei said curiously. "It's not time yet, right?" Jian Nanyu looked at the time. "It's 3:56 p.m. Isn't there still 4 minutes left?" "When everyone is here, we will begin." Gu Fei regretted coming over. These 10,000 people squatting and standing would be a comical sight. Such an effective and sinister idea was indeed the work of the Han family young master. "Then what are you all doing?" Gu Fei asked the few people in front of him. "We are dividing the area. There are 10,000 people and we will divide it into 10. There will be 9 of us. Brother Yu said that he will bring one more person. Look, this is the number of the area." Jian Nanyu took a map and showed it to Gu Fei. It was full of circles, representing the mills in the White Mills territory. 10 of them were marked with numbers from 1 to 10, and the coordinates were indicated next to them. "Which one is mine?" Gu Fei asked. "The 8 of us have already divided it. There are only these 2 left." Jian Nanyu pointed to the 2 on the map. "Then this one." Gu Fei randomly picked one. Jian Nanyu nodded and said, "These 10,000 people will form a team of 1,000 people. There will be 10 professional teams. 2 teams of mages, 2 teams of priests, 2 teams of knights, 1 team of warriors, 1 team of archers, 1 team of thieves, and 1 team of grandmasters of combat. You will lead the mage team." "Okay." Gu Fei nodded. The clear division of the professions was the result of Brother Yu's mail sorting team yesterday. The letters that received money were divided according to the profession's attributes. When the final reply was given, the content of the letter was arranged in a gunny sack. Brother Yu didn't just randomly give out the content. The number of people, profession, and time were all coordinated. Because of the division of professions, attributes weren't too important. After all, a mage like Gu Fei who could add agility was too different. As long as a mage was a mage, they naturally wouldn't learn agility. Of course, the world was vast. Insisting on one's individuality would always be the pursuit of a certain group of players. Therefore, there were also agility warriors and violent thieves. These types of players were also carefully planned out. However, they weren't among the first batch of students. It's 4:00. Everyone, get to your positions. At this moment, Jiannan Yuyo announced. His buddies immediately ran out to look for their mills. 100-era strategist leaped onto the one in front of him. Obviously, this was his territory. Jiannan Yuyo asked Gu Fei, "Can you find it?" Gu Fei nodded. Yes. Gu Fei looked at Jiannan Yu suspiciously. He didn't know why Jiannan Yu asked such a question. Jiannan Yu didn't explain and quickly went to his mill. What Gu Fei didn't know was that these people were online when he was resting during the day. To make it easier to discuss matters at night, such as farming monsters, they gathered together. In the process, they inevitably talked about other things. For example, Gu Fei was one of their topics. The outside world thought that Gu Fei was a peerless expert, but the people in Child Elite Group knew him too well. He was an expert, but he was definitely a noob in the game. In addition, there were unscrupulous guys like Unscathed in Battle and Yutian Shinming. They all blamed their embarrassing moments on Gu Fei. For example, falling off a bridge halfway up a mountain in Wulong Mountain Range. He got lost in Xiaoyu City and was brought back by a kind uncle. Jiannan Yu now thought that Gu Fei wouldn't be able to find the coordinates. "Are you in position?" After a while, Gu Fei received a caring message from Jiannan Yu. "Yes," Gu Fei replied. "Then everyone is in position. I'll inform them. Gold will always shine." Although Jiannan Yu used to be an enemy, his ability was there. Now that he had become the partner of Child Elite Group, he still played a leading role. Obviously, he held the important responsibility of organizing the White Mill. At about 4:07, a valiant large group of people appeared in the range of Gu Fei's eyes. The group of nearly 10,000 people was more majestic than the expeditionary force of Cloud City and the 10 Society Alliance of Moonlit City. When they got closer, Gu Fei looked over and found that someone was carrying a big flag. Gu Fei wiped the sweat off his forehead. Facts had proven that the flag might only have some symbolic meaning in modern warfare, but in ancient times, when communication was not developed, the flag was a beacon that guided the way. It had an immeasurable guiding effect. For example, these 10,000 people couldn't all add each other as friends, nor did they have a unified channel. With a flag in front, it was indeed very convenient for them to follow the organization. When they got closer, the group suddenly began to split up. Immediately after, each team that split up suddenly picked up a flag. Gu Fei could clearly see that there were 10 flags at this time, and one of them was leading the team straight in his direction. The players leveling at White Mill were shocked by the momentum of this team. With organization and numbers, they couldn't help but have an imposing manner. The players whispered among themselves. For a moment, they didn't think that these people were the students of Qianli's One Drunk workshop that they had been looking forward to for a few days. Everyone had come here after observing the wilderness camp. The wilderness camp was a complete mess. There were guilds there, but even if all of the players from the 3 major guilds were online, there wouldn't be many of them. Moreover, they were all leveling alone, so it was a complete mess. It was no wonder that the players didn't think of it for a moment. The idea of the flag was probably put together at the last minute. This could be seen from the quality of the flag. It was a large stick, and on it was a broken piece of equipment that had been discarded by someone else. But with a closer look, the equipment represented the class. For example, the team in front of Gu Fei had picked a beginner mage robe, while the flag in front of Jian Nanyo's team was a warrior's broken leather armor. Han family young master and the others had clearly already told each team which mill to look for. When they saw the people standing on the mills, they understood even more. The unaffiliated players who were leveling didn't dare to block the path of a 1,000-man team. At this time, they could only watch as these people found a mill and surrounded it. At this time, Han family young master messaged Gu Fei, "Do you know how to communicate? Squat and stand up." Gu Fei was startled. He looked around and saw that the players next to the mills were already squatting and standing up. They had already communicated. Try not to ask too many questions, just give instructions. Han family young master said, "If that's enough, let's start as soon as possible. We'll go back first. The next batch should be here soon, so let's get organized quickly." Obviously, because this was the first time everyone had come into contact with this kind of thing, they lacked experience. No matter how much they thought about it, they couldn't handle some unexpected situations. Even Han family young master was rarely as focused as before. Thus, Gu Fei also became serious. Seeing that the players were slowly getting into position, a girl waved at Gu Fei and shouted, "Qianli, Qianli." Gu Fei saw that it was Mudwa. This girl was also a mage, so she might have specially requested to learn from him. Gu Fei smiled and waved in her direction. When the players heard her shout, they realized that the black robe in front of them was the legendary Qianli drunk. They didn't think that they would be personally taught by such a big shot, so they felt a sense of happiness. Gu Fei saw that everyone was in position, so he didn't waste any time and said, "Then let's not waste everyone's time. We'll start right away. Everyone make way, I'll go pull a monster over." Gu Fei was a teacher, so his voice was naturally loud in this kind of situation. Plus, the thousands of people couldn't compare to the tens of thousands of people, so they could barely hear him. There was no need to squat and stand up anymore, but everyone was used to it. When they heard Gu Fei speak, the players in the inner circle turned around and squatted down. Once the news had spread, everyone squatted down and began to move to the side, opening up a path. Gu Fei jumped off the mill and rushed out of the circle. He threw a lightning at a monster with his bare hands, and the monster ran over. Gu Fei turned around and scurried away. The mill teleported and flew up, taking out a staff from his pocket. This was a proper mage lesson, so naturally, he would use a staff and not a sword. When Gu Fei was teaching Wandering Sword and the others, he had prepared 18 types of weapons. He even had 2 broad axes in his pocket. The lesson finally began. Gu Fei skillfully explained as he operated. When he saw that the students were still squatting and standing up, he didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He shouted, "If the people in the outer circle can hear me clearly, then there's no need to squat and stand up." Even so, the players in the outer circle were still worried that they couldn't hear as clearly as the people in the inner circle and would miss something. They insisted on continuing with the manual transmission, so everyone continued to squat and stand up. After all, they had a lot of stamina in the game. They wouldn't be tired even if they squatted a few thousand times. Gu Fei didn't care and let them do as they pleased. When the lesson began, the players who had retreated finally understood what was going on. This was a lesson from Qianli's One Drunk Workshop. Everyone cried out in surprise and reappeared from all corners of the world, gathering to watch. Therefore, outside of the 1,000 people, there were more people gathering in layers. These people were here to freeload. Everyone knew that. Even though the players who had paid the fee felt it was unfair, they couldn't care less now that they were focused on the lesson. It was a waste of time to clash with these people. In the end, they wouldn't learn anything and would be the ones to suffer. Those who understood the situation knew that Qianli's One Drunk Workshop was the absolute seller's market. In negotiations, the most common line they said was, "We won't wait after the deadline." It was 3 in the morning, what an unreasonable time. But regardless of whether they had to work tomorrow or the night shift tonight, which one of them didn't find time to come on time? When they first posted, they had already said that everything would be arranged by them. The money had to be paid in advance, and they had to pay in full. Not willing? If not willing, then don't pay. No one was forcing you. Even though everyone felt bitter, there was nothing they could do. This was a monopoly. They could only grit their teeth and swallow it. Gu Fei had plenty of experience teaching this skill. Even his students would be able to memorize these moves in a 45-minute class. For these more mature and expert players, this amount of time was more than enough, unless they paid to sleep. Gu Fei followed his steps. He first demonstrated as a whole, then explained the theory, combined with the explanation of the sections, then explained the main points and difficulties, and finally reviewed the whole thing. It was lucky to be assigned to learn under Gu Fei. Even if others were more skilled than Gu Fei, they didn't have the foundation of martial arts like Gu Fei, and they didn't have a professional background like Gu Fei's physical education teacher. At this time, Gu Fei's teaching had only been going on for 20 minutes. He was talking about the main points and difficulties, but smart people could see and understand the main points and difficulties. They just needed to practice more. Therefore, a considerable number of people had completely mastered it and couldn't wait to try it out. The freeloading players were suffering at this time. The White Mill had a group of 1,000 people. This was also proposed by Jian Nan and the others after research. For more than 1,000 people, the teaching quality was completely unguaranteed. They couldn't see clearly, let alone listen. It was enough that those paying players didn't kick them at this time. Who would pass the message to them? Squatting down and standing up didn't bring these people. How could they tell if they paid or not? The reply letter in their hands was proof. Chapter 620. Due to the player's own comprehension ability, the learning efficiency of the leveling method varied, but in any case, they had already learned it in the 45 minutes that Gu Fei and the others had arranged. As soon as the lesson ended, quite a few people impatiently went to find monsters to practice on their own. There were others who had to wake up early the next day to do something. Tonight, they were forced to crawl out of bed to learn this efficient leveling method. As soon as they finished learning, they immediately rushed back to the main city and logged off. After the lesson at the White Mill, the Han family young master and the others had already organized the second batch of students 400 meters south of the East Gate. With the experience of the previous batch, not only was it smooth this time, but it was also much faster. After gathering, they set off for the White Mill at 4 o'clock sharp. They didn't care whether everyone had arrived or not. After all, they had repeatedly emphasized that they wouldn't wait for people who were late. The second batch of students was still divided into teams of 1,000 people according to their professions, and there were 2 teams for each profession. The 7 people from the Child Elite Group and Jiannanyu had more than 2 people except for the Grandmaster of Combat class. They could completely take care of everyone. Moreover, Gu Fei and 100 Era's Jingren were both all-rounders, so they could take care of every profession. However, although the 2 could demonstrate the playstyles of each profession, the non-profession playstyles were still somewhat superficial. Compared to the original version, the playstyles developed for each profession had a major feature, which was that they could be coordinated with the skills of the profession. For example, thieves often had the opportunity to use backstab during melee combat. Gu Fei and 100 Era's Jingren's demonstration could only be a verbal statement. Backstab would be more effective in this place. Of course, it wasn't as intuitive as Sword Demon or Blackwater's direct backstab. Therefore, unless there were too many people to take care of, Gu Fei and 100 Era's Jingren would still take care of their professions, Mage and Grandmaster of Combat. This situation also made Jiannanyu and the others worried about the next lesson. Sword Demon and the others had already made it clear that they wouldn't be coming next time. If they had to rely on the 7 of them, from organizing emails to teaching, they would be exhausted to death. Jiannanyu had been a professional player for so many years, and this time, he finally had the opportunity to make a lot of money, but it was inhuman. There was no point in thinking too much about these things in the future. Everyone focused on teaching, and by the end of the lesson, the second batch of students had also been dealt with. Half of the first batch of students left, while the other half stayed. At this time, the second batch of students was also in the same situation. Coupled with the wild players, the White Mill had become extremely lively. More than 10,000 people had gathered here. It wasn't over yet. In the blink of an eye, the Han family young master had sent the third batch of students to the White Mill. There were more than 20,000 people in the White Mill. Gu Fei and the others had already anticipated this situation. At this time, the graduating players who were eager to find monsters to practice with were already a little hesitant because there were so many people around. Some of the more knowledgeable players discovered that with so many people learning this leveling method, if they all wanted to level up in the White Mill, fighting would be unavoidable. Some people had already begun to pay attention to the data and came over to inquire about how many people wanted to learn this leveling method. Also, some people had started to set up their own sects, recruiting wild players for a second round of education. When Gu Fei and the others saw this, they were even more impressed by the wise arrangement of collecting fees in advance to organize the teaching. At that moment, he ignored these independent fellows and continued teaching the third and fourth batches. At the end of the third batch, the White Mill was even more lively. The fourth batch of students was more complicated. There were many players with different personalities. There were violent thieves, agility warriors, physique knights, and even agility mages who worshipped and imitated Gu Fei. Not only did they want to learn from Gu Fei, they also wanted to pester him for autographs. These students had to teach each other. For example, Jian Nanyu took a dagger to teach the violent thieves. Sword Demon held a long sword in each hand to teach the agility warriors. In order to deal with this situation, everyone had learned a few more sets of fighting methods in advance. Although they weren't very proficient, they were still much better than the pirated players who dared to set up their own sects right after class. If they really couldn't cope with it, there were still the two founding masters, Gu Fei and 100 Generation Strategist. This fourth batch took a long time. When it was all over, it was already 9:30 in the morning. The White Mill was extremely lively. Many players who rushed to the morning shift hurriedly came to report. After learning that the efficient leveling method teaching had ended last night, they felt like they had lost their parents. However, when they saw that there were still pirated merchants continuing to teach, they all ran over to secretly learn. The White Mill gradually became as chaotic as the wilderness camp. There were people everywhere recruiting students, stealing monsters, fighting for territory, and occupying the mountains as kings. When the players at the wilderness camp heard the news here, a large number of players also came over to observe. Thus, the two places were linked together and it was extremely chaotic. On the other hand, Gu Fei and the others were already talking and laughing on the way back to the city. Gu Fei, Sword Demon, and a few others who were determined to be temporary workers obviously didn't plan to participate in the next labor. At this moment, they were in a good mood and even forgot about their fatigue. Jian Nanyu and the others were also extremely satisfied with the income of this job. However, their faces were a little gloomy when they thought about how Sword Demon and the others wouldn't be around next time. Although they didn't participate, it meant that fewer people would get a share of the money, which also meant that they would earn more. However, the question of money or life required deep consideration. That's right. Gu Fei suddenly thought of something. Brother Yu, did the guild leaders of Cloud Twilight, Sword Without Oath, and Against the Current not contact you? That day, these bosses all requested to come over and find Gu Fei to sign up. Gu Fei was overwhelmed. Later on, the Han family young master set up, Ask Brother Yu, but he didn't know what the results were. I did. That Cloud Twilight was really impulsive. He said that he wanted to bring 4,000 guild members to sign up. Brother Yu said. But I don't think I saw any of them. Gu Fei said. Ha, it's just words. Did he really bring 4,000 people? Brother Yu said. Then what happened in the end? Gu Fei asked. In the end, I told him that if he wanted to sign up, he would send you money. But we didn't receive any gold from Cloud Twilight or Sword Without Oath, right? Brother Yu said. Nope. Everyone shook their heads. Organizing the letters wasn't something a single person could do. Even though they couldn't remember the names of the people they had seen before, Cloud Twilight and Sword Without Oath could still be considered famous. After seeing them, they would at least have an impression. But among the students today, I reckon that there will definitely be people from their guild. Brother Yu said. Gu Fei thought that this was true. If Cloud Twilight really wanted 4,000 people to come and pay 99 gold per person, then that would be 396,000 gold. Even though he didn't have to pay for this alone, but compared to the 990 gold it would cost for 10 people, the difference was too big. They could spend this small amount of money and then go back to their own guilds to teach. It was better than anything else. It's not just them. Who knows how many people from big guilds are hiding among the students today? Let's keep watching and see how many guilds will be entering the White Mill. Brother, you said. Brother, you really saw through the problem this time. Gu Fei praised. Brother Yu's face immediately turned red. Originally, I thought that we could contact these guilds in advance to save us the effort of advertising and organizing. It would be much easier for them to operate, but in the end, Gu Fei and the others were well aware of the result, but Jian Nan and the others didn't. Huarini was listening when Brother Yu suddenly cut off the topic and hurriedly asked, what was the result? I was looked down on. Brother Yu said gloomily. As expected, Gu Fei and the others thought to themselves. Han family young master acted as if he didn't hear anything and calmly drank his wine. Huarini was still at a loss and stupidly asked, I was looked down on. How did I get looked down on? You'll know in time. Gu Fei patted Huarini's shoulder. Huarini's face turned pale from Gu Fei's pat. Obviously, he still hadn't gotten over his fear of Gu Fei. When Gu Fei suddenly patted him twice, he thought that he was going to be killed instantly. Everyone looked at his good-for-nothing appearance and laughed maniacally. Gu Fei didn't expect that he would cause such a psychological trauma. Embarrassed, he didn't dare to pat this guy again. He said resentfully, why are you so flustered? They chatted and laughed as they walked toward the main city. Brother Yu was so discordant that he wanted to talk about the next lesson. At this time, when they passed by a level 30 training area, Brother Yu pointed out, in fact, it doesn't have to be level 40. Level 30 players also have the same needs, and they may be more eager to level up. 99 gold coins is easy for level 30 players. In fact, why don't we start to develop the low-end market for level 30 players? Level 30. Yes, we should do that first. Han family young master nodded. Gu Fei and the others immediately stopped talking. Huarini, who was still ignorant, added, if that's the case, there are still level 20 and level 10. We should start from level 10. Han family young master glanced at him and didn't say anything. He looked at Jian Nan and said, keep your people in check. Don't interrupt when they are ignorant. Fuck. Huarini was furious. Gu Fei said to him in pain, now you know why you're looked down on, don't you? Flaming Cloak was stunned. South Windbreaker also said, leveling below level 30 is already fast enough. The value of the efficient leveling method is limited. 99 gold coins is a high price. It's really unnecessary to do leveling below level 30. Why don't we do level 30 next? Brother Yu asked for everyone's opinion. Sure. Jian Nanyu agreed and looked at Gu Fei and the 100 reincarnations Jingluan. No matter which business they wanted to do, they needed the technical support of Gu Fei and the 100 reincarnations Jingluan, so they had the right to decide. Whatever, Gu Fei said. Yes. 100 eras Jingluan nodded. The two of them nodded. Jian Nanyu felt that this matter was settled, but when he looked at Brother Yu, he was still looking at young Master Han. Brother Yu was really frightened. He was afraid that his suggestion would also have a huge loophole and would be seen through and despised. Level 30. Han family young master also nodded. Then let's investigate the leveling areas. There are level 30 areas in Baishir City. Brother Yu began to flip through his notebook. Brother Yu. Everyone looked like they had just eaten poison. Why is Brother Yu so restless? Doesn't he want to give us any time to calm down? Huh? What is it? Brother Yu was puzzled. Strike a balance between work and rest, everyone said. We're not doing any work right now. We're just discussing information. Brother Yu said. Everyone finally cried. Brother Yu, it's fun for you, but it's work for us too. Brother Yu's enthusiasm was met with a cold shoulder. He put away his notebook. Fine, we'll talk about it in a few days. Keep it up. Yu Tianxinming and Unscathed in Battle weren't going to come next time. They were gloating and encouraging everyone. Jiannan Yu and the others were quite depressed. What kind of people were these people? Why did we suffer so much in their hands? How can a disciplined team like ours endure a bunch of hooligans who don't know what's good for them? Everyone was just about to walk out of the level 30 area. Suddenly, everyone heard a sharp sound. Those who were familiar with the sound knew that it was an archer's snipe. This wasn't something new in a level 30 area. Archers would often use this skill, but this time, the sound came from so close. Everyone was still in a daze. Gu Fei had already twisted his body to the side and an arrow brushed past his face. Everyone immediately realized that they had been ambushed. Other than Brother Yu, everyone present was a PvP expert. They instantly determined the enemy's position from the direction of the arrow and turned to look in this direction. Jiannan Yu had already pulled out his sword and shield to protect himself. His brothers also cooperatively hid behind him. Han family young master and the others all looked towards Unscathed in Battle. Unscathed in Battle stomped his feet. What are you looking at me for? I'm not a heavy armored warrior. I'm not either. Yu Tianxinming said. He's shameless. How can a berserker use a shield? Unscathed in Battle was very depressed. This was a question that he had been struggling with. However, he wasn't that close with Jiannan, so he hadn't found a chance to ask. Jiannan and the others glanced over. They didn't look like an expert team at all. They had been ambushed, yet they weren't preparing to defend and were still bickering with each other. In the end, they saw that Gu Fei had already pulled out his sword and charged in the direction of the arrow. His boldness caused Jiannan and the others to look at the flaming robe hidden behind Jiannan's back. There's no way to compare. Everyone thought to themselves. They could also determine the direction of the attack. It was a huge rock dozens of meters away. Yu Tianxinming stared with his eagle eyes and said, 3 people. Everyone looked at him in disdain. It was enough for 3 people to have such little information. Eagle eyes, Han family young master calmly took out his binoculars. After a glance, he slapped the lens back. Hongchen Yixiao. It's him. Everyone thought in their hearts. Sword Demon and the others knew that this person was going to make things difficult for them. Jiannan also knew that even though he had withdrawn from working with Hongchen Yixiao, he believed that this person wouldn't stop attacking Gu Fei just like that. He didn't expect him to attack already. Did he already have a way to deal with Qinli drunk? There were indeed 3 people on top of the huge rock. After missing his attack, Water-Breaking Arrow smiled and said, "What do you think? Am I right? Don't look down on them just because they are players. Especially this Qinli drunk. How is it? He exposed his position with just 1 arrow. It's an ambush." Water-Breaking Arrow turned his head and reminded Yi Xiaowu on the other side. The person who shot the arrow knelt on the ground with one hand and pulled the bowstring with the other. He didn't agree with Water-Breaking Arrow's words. The sound of arrows is louder than gunshots in this game. Especially with this sniping skill, how can it not be exposed? As soon as he finished speaking, he released the bowstring. However, the moment he released the bowstring, the hand holding the bow trembled slightly. 2 consecutive arrows were released, but because of this slight tremble, the 2 arrows were out of shape. 1 arrow should have chased the other, and the 2 arrows flew in a straight line. However, not long after they flew out, they obviously flew in different trajectories. Gu Fei, who was sprinting towards the huge rock, heard the sound of the bow and saw 2 arrows flying towards him. With his outstanding eyesight, he could tell that the 2 arrows flew in different trajectories. The first arrow was a predetermined attack, but the direction of the attack was to the left of his body. Naturally, the easiest way to dodge it was to take a step to the right. However, if he did so, he would fall into the attack of the second arrow. This arrow was aimed at the center of his body after taking a step to the right. He didn't think that a simple 2 consecutive arrows could actually shoot such a precise small trap. This person's skill level was definitely above Yu Tianxinming's. He was a guy who had actual archery skills. As Gu Fei thought about it, he took a step to the left. The first arrow brushed past his body, and the second arrow was ridiculously crooked as if it had been shot directly off course. Ha! The person who shot the arrow on top of the huge rock couldn't help but cry out in surprise. It wasn't difficult to easily dodge these 2 arrows, but it was difficult to see through the traps hidden in these 2 arrows. That was definitely not an ordinary person's eyesight. Was he really a strong person? As this person thought about it, he had already drawn his bow and knocked another arrow. He said to water-breaking arrow, "Cooperate." Water-breaking arrow didn't say anything and pulled out his short crossbow. Peng, 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 peng. Several arrows flew out in one breath. The archer next to him shook his head and sighed, "Your shooting level is about the same as mine. Above 500 meters is my domain. Is it possible to attack beyond 500 meters in this game?" This person said as he tilted his head and looked at Yi Xiaowu. Yi Xiaowu smiled bitterly and shook his head. Alas! This person sighed and suddenly lowered his head. Xiao! A sharp sound flew over his head. This person's expression was as usual. He's starting to counterattack. Yes. Water-breaking arrow responded as he continued to shoot. However, Gu Fei was already quite familiar with his technique. He easily dodged arrow after arrow with footwork. Water-breaking arrow was helpless. The other person also shook his head. Slow, too slow. The speed of the arrows is too slow. It's useless no matter how accurate the arrows are. With this person's reaction speed, it's enough to dodge. As he spoke, he loosened his grip and released another arrow. This time, it wasn't aimed at Gu Fei, but at the group of people who were rushing towards the boulder. Fuck! Yu Tianxinming roared. An arrow flew from the opposite giant rock and hit his shoulder. It's an expert. Yu Tianxinming reminded the crowd. The Han family young master and the other priests had already refreshed and replenished Yu Tianxinming's HP. They could already see that it was an expert. They weren't Gu Fei. They didn't have such abnormal reactions. They didn't wait until they saw or heard the arrow to react. For them, this reaction time was enough for the arrow to fly in front of them. How could they dodge in time? Therefore, when faced with long-range attacks, normal players relied on constant movement to prevent the opponent from accurately hitting the target. Yu Tianxinming's movement was fast enough and his positioning was also cool enough. This was seen by everyone. Under such circumstances, he was still accurately shot by the opponent. The opponent's shooting skill was definitely beyond the understanding of normal players. Unscathed in battle, who had short legs, was even more nervous. If the opponent could even catch Yu Tianxinming's movements, how could his movements compare? Chapter 621. The only good news was that although this person's archery skills were superb, at least the damage wasn't that scary. Yu Tianxinming was still alive after being hit by this arrow. These experts had been in contact with Gu Fei for too long and had gotten used to it. If it wasn't an instant kill, then the damage wasn't scary. In reality, how could it be so easy to instantly kill someone in the game? Even if Gu Fei could instantly kill many players, he still needed to spin double flame flash to deal double the damage. Although Yu Tianxinming was an archer with low HP, he was still an expert on the leaderboards. His equipment was very strong, especially after earning 250,000 renminbi yesterday and getting 2 exquisite equipment. If it wasn't for players like Gu Fei or Slender Waist Dance who had broken the rules, an instant kill wouldn't have happened to him. In reality, the enemy archer's snipe had only taken out a quarter of Yu Tianxinming's HP, the damage isn't high, only a quarter. Yu Tianxinming comforted the others. Tisk. Unscathed in battle immediately became indifferent. If the shot only took out a quarter of Yutian Shinming's HP, then there was even less for him to be afraid of. Child Elite Group's side let out a sigh of relief. On the other hand, South Azure Sword and the others' eyeballs were about to fall out of their sockets. As members of the robber party, they had sharp eyes. Looking at Yutian Shinming's equipment, they estimated his attributes to be around 80 to 90%. A character like this had a quarter of his HP taken out by a single snipe, and he still said, the damage isn't high. Although they were all people who had been instantly killed by Gu Fei, they hadn't reached this level of thinking. Their judgment of a player's damage was still normal. In their minds, Gu Fei was a special existence, unlike Sword Demon and the others, who had completely normalized Gu Fei. Charge! When Unscathed in battle saw that the opponent's damage wasn't abnormal, he didn't hesitate anymore. He straightened his chest and charged forward. The other party only had 3 people, while they had more than 10 people, and all of them were experts. How could they be afraid? Apart from Gu Fei, the 2 thieves, Sword Demon and Blackwater, who were in stealth, the others maintained a balanced pace and continued to move forward steadily. They were mainly afraid that if they ran too far, they would be out of the healing range of the priests. If an ordinary person were to do something like Gu Fei's, they would definitely be criticized for being unconscious, having no sense of teamwork, and not knowing how to cooperate. However, this was Gu Fei. Everyone could only be envious. What else could they say? As the troops advanced, the 2 archers, Yutian Shinming and Glu, also returned fire. Their arrows hit the huge rocks on the opposite side with a peng-peng sound. The water-breaking arrow and the archer's attacks were not as arrogant as before, they were much more restrained. How dare you ambush us like this? Everyone was muttering in their hearts. Seeing that Gu Fei was already close to the huge rock, they all felt that the battle was about to end. When Gu Fei teleported to the top, there would only be a few corpses left on top of the huge rock. As they were thinking, Gu Fei, who had been charging forward, suddenly slid to the left. The night streamer in his hand raised a flame and slashed at the empty space on his right. The air on the right blurred, and a figure had already flashed out. He slid backward and narrowly avoided Gu Fei's slash. Then, with a flip of his right hand, the thief was actually holding a short crossbow. With a peng sound, he fired an arrow at Gu Fei. Gu Fei tilted his head and dodged it. He chased after the thief and wanted to slash at him, but the thief had already turned back and ran away. His speed was a bit faster than Gu Fei, who was an all-agility mage. Everyone, be careful. It seems like the other side has more people. The Han family young master's expression turned serious. That red dust smile guy should be very clear about the strength of their side. Did he really think that he could kill them with just 2 archers with decent archery skills? That was too naive. It seemed like there were other helpers lying in ambush. Be careful around you, Southguard Azure Sword warned when he saw the stealth thief ambushing Gu Fei. Flaming Jacket tossed a Skyfall firewheel. This was a common anti-stealth method used in team battles when there were no anti-stealth skills. The thief was nowhere to be seen. Flaming Jacket then tossed a flaming 3000 layers inferno to the right, but the thief was still nowhere to be seen. While everyone was muttering to themselves, arrows suddenly flew at them from all directions. Crap, it's an ambush. Southguard Azure Sword roared. His team had already formed into a group. He was worried that the Child Elite group would fight on their own. However, when he turned around, he realized that the other side had formed even faster than them. Unscathed in battle, Brother Yu, and Yutian Shinming stood in a triangular formation, protecting the Cleric Han family young master in the middle. They moved closer to Southguard Azuresword's team, intending to form a square formation. The quality of Southguard Azuresword's team was unquestionable. They quickly accepted the 4 of them into their team. The 3 clerics and mage, Flaming Jacket, were protected in the center, while Unscathed in battle and Southguard Azure Sword stood in the most concentrated area. The paladin quickly cast defense buff on everyone. Everyone could see the current situation clearly. The level 30 leveling area they were in had a long history in Whitestone City. It was called Whitestone Forest. Whitestone City was named after Whitestone. No one knew if the trees had grown to Shady City, but there were very few trees around Whitestone City. It was a desolate place. In this desolate wilderness, there were grayish-white stones of all sizes growing everywhere, such as the 9527 stones at the wilderness camp, which was one of the representative stones. Whitestone Forest was an area where white stones gathered. The one that Yi Xiaowu and the others were currently lying on was one of them. There were many more in the surroundings, just that they were of different sizes and shapes. The people who had suddenly appeared were using these white stones as cover. When Gu Fei and the others stepped into their encirclement, they attacked in one go. Luring the enemy, ambushing them, it was a very simple tactical trap. Han family young master painfully taught everyone, "Comrades, look, this is the harm of showing off your heroism." Yeah. Everyone nodded. If it wasn't for Gu Fei rushing out as soon as he was ambushed, they might not have chased into the trap so hurriedly. Everyone, please understand. Qianli hasn't killed anyone in a long time. He's probably lonely, unscathed in battle said. Where's Aeon Jingle? Brother, you asked. He realized that there was no Aeon Jingle in the circle where everyone was gathered. Isn't he there? Look, another heroism. Han family young master shook his head. Aeon Jingle obviously didn't have much team awareness. While everyone was gathering, he continued to rush to support Gu Fei. Everyone had reason to believe that if it wasn't for the fact that this person's movement speed was slower than Gu Fei's, he might have been moving side by side with Gu Fei. Despite being surrounded, they still had the energy to chat. After being hit by a few arrows, they quickly realized that although the enemy's firepower was fierce, their attacks weren't that great. Carefully observing the surroundings, these people were either flashing out from behind the white rocks or lying in ambush on top of the white rocks. Although they were all using bows and arrows to attack, not all of them were archers. Archers, especially sharpshooters, had a huge bonus to their bow and arrows. Coupled with the skills of their class and the requirement of bow and arrow equipment, ordinary classes using bows and arrows were completely different from archers using bows and arrows. There were all kinds of players ambushing them, but they were all using bows and arrows. Although they seemed to be good at archery, they didn't have any class to rely on, so there was nothing to worry about. What surprised them even more was the faces of those players. They were all weather-beaten faces. Yutian Shinming couldn't help but exclaim, "Fuck, why are there so many uncles so early in the morning?" There was a theoretical basis for this exclamation. Although online games could be played by anyone, the main consumer group was still young people. There were very few uncles in their 30s and 40s. In addition, those in their 30s and 40s usually had stable careers. Even if they wanted to play, they had to wait until their break time after work. It was rare to meet such people early in the morning, but now there was a bunch of them. These old veterans of online games couldn't help but be surprised. It was a powerful ambush, but the ambushed targets didn't seem to be injured at all. They talked and laughed, and there weren't any casualties at all. This made the uncles quite depressed. Yi Xiaowu, who was still lying on the big rock, sighed, "Without the support of a class, it's really hard to use the power of a bow and arrow." The archer on the side said disappointedly, "It's not like they have support. Their arrows are too slow." Yi Xiaowu was depressed. "We can't have guns in this game, right? If they really had guns, this ambush would have been enough to cripple half of them. They might have been wiped out by now," that person said. "Even so, it's still a good consumption. If they don't find a way to break out, they won't last long," Yi Xiaowu said. "Old Thunder and Big Thunder haven't figured out how to play the game yet?" Water-breaking Arrow asked. The archer said disapprovingly, "It's not that those two don't know how to play. They just feel embarrassed that the word, mage, has to be shouted. You'll get used to it if you shout." Water-breaking Arrow said. "Look, isn't that Old Thunder?" The archer pointed in a direction. Water-breaking arrow looked in that direction and saw that there was also a person lying on the small rock. Originally, he also played with a bow and arrow, but the effect of a mage playing with a bow and arrow couldn't be any weaker. This person obviously couldn't bear his weak attack. He put away his bow and arrow, quietly took out a magic staff, crawled a few steps forward, pointed the magic staff forward, and muttered a few words. A ring of fire spread out in the sky. But how rich were the game experience of these masters? From the beginning, they had already figured out the distribution and classes of their opponents. Mages, a class with long-range firepower, had been closely watched. This person's action had been seen by them, and they had taken precautions in advance. As soon as the ring of fire appeared, everyone moved together and dodged this falling ring of fire. The mage missed the first attack and was waiting for the second one. Suddenly, a thief flashed behind him with a sinister smile, waved his sword, and stabbed. How could the team under the command of the Han family young master just resist and not play any tricks? At this moment, standing in the middle of the circle and allowing them to attack wildly was also a way to attract their attention and firepower. Sword Ghoul and Blackwater, the two thieves who had been in stealth since the beginning, had already received orders to counterattack the ambushers and create an opening. Blackwater didn't know when he had developed an inexplicable dislike for mages, so he chose a mage as his target. At this time, he climbed up the rock with great difficulty and stabbed the mage lying on the ground with his sword. Who would have thought that the mage would suddenly flip his body and kick Blackwater out of his hiding spot? Blackwater was shocked, but it was too late to take back his sword when he bent down to stab the mage. The old face in front of him smirked at him, stretched out his hands, grabbed Blackwater's arms, and put his right leg upright on Blackwater's lower abdomen. Then, he pulled his leg forward and kicked. The mage was weak, but it was no problem for him to use such a move. Blackwater was kicked off the big rock by this rabbit eagle kick. His face was full of mud. What the fuck, what's going on? Did Shinli get possessed by a drunken man? Blackwater was at a loss. He didn't expect there would be a second mage who could beat him up so badly. What are you waiting for? Come here. The party shouted at Blackwater. He suddenly appeared outside the circle alone and immediately became the focus of attention. He didn't have the reflexes and skills of Gu Fei and 100 Lives strategist. If all the arrows were aimed at him, how could he survive? Blackwater's reaction wasn't slow. As soon as he heard the shout, he immediately sprinted towards the party. However, these archers were extremely skilled. With their speed and accuracy, the only fortunate thing was that most of their damage output wasn't that great. Although Blackwater's equipment wasn't top-notch, it wasn't ordinary either. Furthermore, the team had come to his aid. With 3 clerics working together, he wasn't instantly vaporized. However, the experienced players could see that even so, Blackwater might not survive. The damage he suffered was far greater than the recovery of the 3 priests. Azure Blade didn't say a word. He turned around and used charge to support Blackwater. Arrows were immediately fired at him. Azuma's defense was higher, and he had the protection of the sword and shield, so he could last longer than Blackwater. At this moment, the Han family's young master was also using some of his skills to heal Azuma's HP. His skill made Dao Xiangmu and Lin Sinsen admire him from the bottom of their hearts. With this level of control, it would be a waste for him to only heal one person. They had to give him a few people at the same time. Jian Nanyu rushed out and quickly came to Blackwater's aid. He covered for Blackwater and finally brought him back. "What's going on?" the others asked. "I don't know. He seemed to have noticed me as soon as I got close." Blackwater was depressed. "I'm afraid these people aren't easy to deal with." Han family young master showed a rare look of worry. He looked around and pointed in a direction, "Move in that direction." "What about Qinli and Baisher?" the others asked. "Do whatever you want." Han family young master sent a message to Sword Demon, "Don't be in a hurry. These people aren't that easy to deal with." The sorcerer's attack, Blackwater's appearance, being kicked, and being supported had all happened in the blink of an eye. Gu Fei was rushing and dodging the arrows. He didn't notice what was happening. He saw that the rock was right in front of him. Just as he was about to teleport to it, the sky darkened. A figure descended from the sky like a giant bird, raising his leg and slashing at Gu Fei. Swallow slash. Don't take it head-on. Baishe Jingluan saw it clearly and yelled. Gu Fei was experienced in martial arts. However, there were some settings in the game that could affect the outcome of a battle. He had to take it into consideration. For example, Swallow Slash had a special attribute bonus. This bonus depended on the height of the skill user. The higher the height, the stronger the priority and damage of the skill. Baishe Jingluan was afraid that Gu Fei didn't know about this skill. At this moment, the person flew down from the huge rock several meters high and used Swallow Slash, which was extremely powerful. Although Gu Fei's magic damage was fierce, the sorcerer's skill was extremely weak in terms of priority. If he took it head-on and didn't kill his opponent in one shot, the Swallow Slash would definitely trample on Gu Fei. If not for this characteristic, it would be a taboo to attack from the sky without any support. With their foresight, Gu Fei and Baishe Jingluan could tell that these guys were not ordinary players. It was impossible that they didn't know this. However, the opponent still chose to attack in this way. Obviously, he had nothing to fear. Gu Fei listened to Baishe Jingluan's advice and didn't attack head-on. However, seeing that the opponent was so arrogant because of the game's skill, Gu Fei didn't want to be outdone. He raised his hand and pointed. The guy who was in the air with the Swallow Slash was immediately stunned. Gu Fei, who was on the ground, had disappeared. Behind you. Water-breaking Arrow, who was on the big rock, quickly reminded. Gu Fei actually used teleportation to float in the air. Water-breaking Arrow's mouth was fast enough, but it was still not as fast as Gu Fei's sword. At this moment, he shook his body in the air and slashed with double flame flash. His opponent immediately experienced the disadvantage of having no support under his feet. In this empty space, no matter how strong his waist and abdominal muscles were, no matter how fiercely he twisted his body, the space and range of his movements were still extremely limited. There was no way he could dodge Gu Fei's well-planned attack. The guy who was hit by the sword was not killed on the spot. After landing on the ground, he quickly rolled away from Gu Fei's attack range. He suffered a big loss in the first exchange, but he didn't panic at all. Apart from that, his expression didn't show any signs of surprise, which was extremely rare among the players. If an ordinary person fought with Gu Fei and was hit by Gu Fei's attack, even if they didn't die, the huge drop in their HP would be enough to paint their faces green or white. However, this guy didn't show any reaction, as if he didn't notice the drop in HP after the sword. Gu Fei didn't hesitate. After landing, he immediately chased after the guy and slashed in the direction he rolled to. 2 dual flame flashes and 1 instant movement. Gu Fei's poor mana was once again exposed. This time, he didn't even bother to use a spell for this attack. When the opponent saw Gu Fei's sword coming, he didn't panic. He twisted his body and dodged to the side. How could he know that this degree of dodging was completely within Gu Fei's calculations? Gu Fei changed his attack and chased after him. The guy's unchanging expression finally changed. He realized that the opponent in front of him wasn't simple, but it wasn't difficult for him to dodge the sword. He turned around and dodged the sword again. This time, he didn't want to be passive. As he twisted his body, he whipped his leg towards Gu Fei. The range of this kick was extremely large. It directly swept towards Gu Fei's head. The momentum of this kick was like a thunderbolt. It could be imagined that in real life, this kick would be enough to make a person faint. Gu Fei took a step to the side and dodged the attack. The sword in his hand turned and slashed again. If this was in real life, Gu Fei wouldn't use this kind of counterattack. But in the game, there was no need to care so much. As Gu Fei spoke, he had already started chanting the double flame flash. Behind him, 100 Eras Jingluan was dumbfounded. Wow, it really is a game. He even used this kind of move. It's too lascivious. The Dark Knight light sword drew out a flame and directly slashed at the opponent's crotch that was exposed after the whip kick was thrown high. Butterfly knot, the legendary battle is here. Gorgeous battle, battle, battle. Chapter 622. It was an era of peace and harmony. Exchanges between martial arts practitioners were limited to sparring. Although it was unavoidable to bump into each other, moves that were too ruthless were never used. For example, the move that Gu Fei was using now was definitely a forbidden move. If it was used, his opponent would have no descendants. If he happened to be an unmarried man who was only taught by his family, it would be equivalent to cutting off the inheritance of a martial art. The consequences would be severe. Therefore, although Gu Fei knew this kind of move, he had never used it before. It could be said that he had no experience in using it in actual combat. Bai Jingluan was also a person in the martial arts circle, so he was familiar with this situation. However, it was precisely because of this that he was impressed by Gu Fei's ability to judge and use this unfamiliar move in an instant. The word, too lewd, was actually praising Gu Fei's martial arts, not anything else. His opponent looked embarrassed after taking the blow. He jumped to the side with a ball of fire between his legs, but it was extinguished before he could pounce on it. After suffering 2 losses in a row, he no longer dared to underestimate his opponent. Gu Fei was also very surprised. This person had taken 2 of his dual flame flashes, but he was still as lively as a tiger. This person was only a grandmaster of combat, and Gu Fei could tell from the way he leaped and jumped that his agility was definitely not low. Yet, he was still able to withstand 2 dual flame flash attacks. There was only one explanation: this person was wearing equipment with fire resistance. It seemed that he was here to deal with him. Gu Fei looked up and saw Hongqian Yixiao looking down at him from the top of the boulder. Beside him was the water-breaking arrow, and there was another person that he did not recognize. Both of them were holding short crossbows, waiting for an opportunity to attack Gu Fei. Gu Fei's mana was currently exhausted, and he could not even use a dual flame flash. However, his expression did not change. He looked up at the 3 people above him, then looked at his opponent, who was still holding his legs between his legs. How should I address you? In comparison, Gu Fei had a better impression of this kind of person who liked to fight in close combat. The man calmed himself down, and his posture became more relaxed. He said in a deep voice, "Mountain-splitting axe." Water-breaking arrow, mountain-splitting axe, these IDs sounded like they came from the same series. Gu Fei nodded. Old Duan's friend? The man didn't hide it and replied, "Comrade." As expected. Gu Fei had already noticed that these people were not ordinary. Judging from the fact that no matter what class they were, all of them were shooting with bows. They had the same temperament as Broken Water Arrow, they were very used to using guns to attack from afar. Looking at the age of these people, those in their early 30s were considered young. Most of them were probably in their 40s. Some of them had white hair on their temples. Gu Fei guessed that they might be a group of retired soldiers. He didn't expect that Hongqian Yixiao could gather such a group of people. Gu Fei couldn't help but raise his head and glance at him. He looked excited. "You've really worked hard." After saying that, he glanced at them. "Do you want to come one by one or all at once?" 100 Eras Jingluan quickly came over and said, "Don't be too careless." "I'm not careless." Gu Fei said calmly, "There are 4 of them. One of them can be ignored, and there are 2 of us. Do you think it's careless?" "I'm included." 100 Eras Jingluan was surprised. Gu Fei was even more surprised. "Then why did you chase after me?" "I." 100 Eras Jingluan couldn't answer for a moment. Mountain-splitting axe smiled and said, "You're very confident, young man." Gu Fei also smiled. "Old Kai, right? Come, I'll spar with you again." "Okay." Mountain-splitting axe nodded happily. Hung Xiao, who was on the boulder, waved his hand and restored mountain-splitting axe's life. Gu Fei was depressed. You can even reply. Then I'll reply too. With that said, he took out an apple and was about to eat it, but the apple that was about to reach his mouth suddenly exploded. Gu Fei looked at the archer that he didn't know. Is it against the rules to eat an apple? The archer suddenly shot the apple when Gu Fei was about to eat it. His marksmanship was naturally extraordinary, but at this moment, he was even more surprised by Gu Fei's calmness. The arrow flew, and Gu Fei didn't even flinch, which meant that he had clearly determined that the arrow was flying toward the apple in his hand and nothing else. At the same time, this calmness also meant that although Gu Fei was facing mountain-splitting axe, he didn't neglect his guard at all. At this distance, these kinds of arrows in the game still couldn't threaten him. Meanwhile, splitting mountain axe was already in a stance. Let me take a good look at the skills of you martial artists. Just as Gu Fei was about to attack, 100 Era's Jingluan jumped out first. Thank you for your advice. Sigh. Before Gu Fei could say anything, 100 Era's Jingluan had already taken the initiative to attack, throwing a punch. Both of them were grandmasters of combat, and their attributes were similar. Their strength was also balanced, so they didn't have to worry as much as when Gu Fei went up. Their fists and feet collided directly, and it was very lively. Gu Fei knew that this wasn't a martial arts competition, but a group of people who had encountered an ambush. It was a battlefield of life and death, and it really wasn't suitable to watch the battle leisurely. The child elite group and Jiannan Yu were also tired from fighting. Mountain-splitting axe was entangled by 100 Era's Jingluan, so Gu Fei immediately went around to the side of the giant rock. In the end, after one round, he was depressed. This giant rock was well behaved, and there was no place for him to climb up. Yi Xiaowu and the others must have used something like a flying hook to climb up. Gu Fei couldn't teleport now, and there was no way he could climb up since there were people occupying it. After this round, when he looked at the battle under the rock again, 100 Era's Jingluan was actually at a disadvantage. Mountain-splitting axe and Gu Fei had actually exchanged 2 blows before. One time, he used a rootless flying swallow slash while falling from a high altitude, and the other time, he wasn't very steady either, so he used a high-level whip kick at an unsuitable time. These 2 moves could be said to have huge openings, and Gu Fei was able to take advantage of those openings in an instant to deal 2 clean and efficient blows. It could be seen that mountain-splitting axe didn't take Gu Fei seriously when he first entered the field. The 2 aggressive moves were with the mentality of directly killing Gu Fei in one move. After suffering from these 2 moves, mountain-splitting axe's attitude finally changed. He realized that although it was a game and his opponent was a player, they were indeed real. Only then did he put away his playful attitude and became completely serious. Mountain-splitting axe's moves were firm and fierce. Everything was simple and practical. What was more powerful was his courageous momentum, which was something that ordinary martial artists like Gu Fei and the others didn't have. This kind of momentum was trained in real life and death battlefields. Many years of retirement did not dull this kind of momentum. It was just that he gradually hid it because he had no way to use it. Even when he was fighting against Gu Fei, he didn't reveal it. However, after he realized that Gu Fei was a strong opponent that he needed to take seriously, this kind of temperament that he had hidden for many years finally gradually revealed itself as he fought with 100 Era's Jingluan. At this moment, after Gu Fei ran around the giant rock, mountain-splitting axe seemed to have been reborn into a different person. Something like momentum wouldn't make an attack's damage much stronger, but it would affect the enemy's mentality, judgment, and many other psychological aspects. The one who gained the upper hand in momentum would be full of confidence and move smoothly without thinking. On the other hand, the one who lacked momentum would be overcautious and hesitant. Even though there was a chance to win, they would miss it because they were absent-minded. 100 Era's Jingluan's current situation was that he was being suppressed in momentum. Before Gu Fei left, the 2 of them were attacking and defending each other. After a round, 100 Era's Jingluan was already 70% defending and 30% attacking. He already had the idea of defending and counterattacking, but in fact, if he was confident that he could defeat his opponent, why would he need to defend? Wouldn't it be over with just a few punches and kicks? If it was someone like the Han family young master, Gu Fei would suspect that it was some despicable and shameless plot. However, 100 Era's Jingluan was a real kid. Gu Fei reckoned that he really felt that he might not be able to defeat his opponent after weighing the pros and cons, so he had the mentality of defending and counterattacking. On the other hand, when Mountain Splitting Axe saw 100 Era's Jingluan's posture, his momentum was even stronger, and his confidence had reached the point of inflating. Bang, bang, bang. Mountain Splitting Axe simply lashed out 3 consecutive high-ranking kicks. 100 Era's Jingluan blocked with his right arm, then with his left arm, then with his right arm, until his fists hit his own head. Mountain Splitting Axe reached out with his right hand and directly grabbed 100 Era's Jingluan's throat. Following that, his left hand had already grabbed one of 100 Era's Jingluan's arms. At this moment, he used a skill from the game, Hugging Throw. 100 Era's Jingluan's body was thrown into the air, but he twisted 100 Era's Jingluan's arm in the air and directly pressed him to the ground. Gu Fei couldn't help but sigh as he watched. This person was much more professional than him and 100 Era's Jingluan when it came to capturing someone alive. Mountain Splitting Axe would have already won if they were to compete in martial arts, but this was a PK in the game. Of course, it wasn't over until the white light flashed. Mountain Splitting Axe obviously wasn't here to train his body, but to directly beat 100 Era's Jingluan to death. As soon as Gu Fei arrived, he heard the sound of wind behind him. Water-breaking Arrow and the archer above him had been staring at him for a long time. At this moment, they both shot arrows at him. Gu Fei smiled and bowed to the side, and the arrows shot by the two of them shot at Mountain Splitting Axe like meteors chasing after the moon. Despicable. Water-breaking Arrow and the other person shouted at the same time. Seeing that Gu Fei was going to help, they hurriedly shot arrows to stop him. Little did they know that Gu Fei had actually been luring them to shoot in this direction, asking them to besiege Wei to rescue Zhao Zhao. No matter how fast Gu Fei ran, he couldn't be faster than the arrows. No matter how fierce Gu Fei's attacks were, the damage still couldn't compare to the arrows of these two fellows. The two people angrily opened fire at Gu Fei. Gu Fei dodged left and right, but none of the arrows hit him. The two people cooperated to form a crossfire, but in the end, all of them were dodged by Gu Fei with a cheeky smile. The archer finally couldn't hold it in anymore. Back then, he was a famous sharpshooter in the army, and he was the shooting record holder so far. In the game, his ID was called Sniper God. Now that the target was 20 meters away from him, he couldn't hit him no matter what, so he felt very sullen. At this moment, he finally exploded. He ruthlessly threw the short crossbow in his hand to the ground and cursed, "What fucking game? What fucking crossbow? Even if I made one myself, it would be better than this." On the side, Yi Xiaowu looked embarrassed. Below, Gu Fei saw everything clearly, and at this moment, he let out a long breath. The relaxed look on his face was all fake. The two people's crossfire was well coordinated, and Gu Fei also had to be 120% focused to barely avoid it. In fact, just now, Gu Fei had been hit by an arrow, but he immediately turned around and waved his hand to pull out the arrow. Neither of them saw it, and they just pretended that the arrow didn't hit him. The water-breaking arrow was fine, because he had a deep impression of Gu Fei's skills. Moreover, he wasn't that conceited about his shooting skills. On the other hand, the sniper god next to him finally couldn't bear it anymore. He didn't think that Gu Fei was very good, but only that the archery equipment in the game was too lousy. If he had a gun, he felt that he would have already blown up Gu Fei's head 180 times. On the other side, Mountain Splitting Axe was forced to dodge by a few arrows from his own people. 100 Lives strategist was not a dog that dared not get up after being beaten to the ground. With such a chance to catch his breath, he immediately stood up and fought in Jianghu again, but the situation was still the same. Gu Fei scolded him for not making progress. He rushed over to replace him and pointed at the 3 people on top of the boulder. Go kill them. Where did you go just now? 100 Lives strategist was still gossiping. Gu Fei's face darkened. I went to pee behind the boulder. Mountain Splitting Axe and 100 Lives strategist had made him full of confidence, and he didn't have any objections when he saw that Gu Fei had come over to replace him. He smiled and said, you martial artists have too many changes in your routines and moves, which are too complicated and focus on skills. The grappling and grappling boxing techniques that we learned in the army were born for actual combat. They are simple, direct, and more effective. In terms of performance, I'm not as good as you, and in terms of actual combat, you're no match for me. Then what should we do? Should we surrender and not kill? Gu Fei smiled. Mountain Splitting Axe laughed. Looks like you're still not convinced. I have to admit that I underestimated you before, and you took advantage of me in the end. But I won't do it anymore. Although you're a mage in this game, I think you're better than that Grandmaster of Combat in terms of skills, right? Of course, he's only at my level 10 years ago. Gu Fei said. Fuck. 100 Lives strategist, who was thinking of a way to climb the boulder, didn't forget to turn around and give Gu Fei the middle finger. Come on. Gu Fei took the initiative to attack. He actually put away the Night Streamer sword in his hand and threw a punch at Mountain Splitting Axe. You're not even using your weapon. You're really confident. Speaking of which, I really don't know how to use a sword. That thing is too troublesome to carry around. It's time to get rid of it. Mountain Splitting Axe said. It's so new. How many years has it been since it was eliminated? Gu Fei said. The Mountain Splitting Axe was considered from the perspective of the battlefield. However, from this perspective, swords had never been used on the battlefield on a large scale. Most of the time, swords were just a symbol of status. They had never been the main weapon of war. Gu Fei swung his hand to block the incoming punch, but Gu Fei's hand had already been retracted with a whoosh. Mountain Splitting Axe's block missed. He shook his head helplessly, disapproving of Gu Fei and the others' excessive feints and tricks. As a result, when Gu Fei retracted his fist, his right foot took a small step behind his left foot. His left foot rose from the ground and gave a swift and violent side kick. Mountain Splitting Axe was startled and hurriedly retreated. In the end, Gu Fei's left foot had only risen halfway when it landed on the ground. His left hand reached out and swiped in front of Mountain Splitting Axe's eyes. His hidden right fist had already risen and fiercely hooked onto Mountain Splitting Axe's jaw. Gu Fei's strength was weak, so this punch didn't cause much damage. After the punch, he immediately retreated. Mountain Splitting Axe stood in place, dumbstruck. Gu Fei laughed. Don't you feel a sense of familiarity? This. Mountain Splitting Axe had done quite a bit of research on fighting. Although there were some changes in Gu Fei's previous step attack, he could still recognize it with a glance. Is it the side hook commonly used in your fighting techniques? Gu Fei asked. Correct. Mountain Splitting Axe nodded. There's a question that I don't know if you've ever thought about. What question? Airplanes, cannons, guns, and ammunition. These weapons are all researched and manufactured by people. Then what about your fighting techniques? Where did they come from? From the old 20 moves capturing enemy fist to the more widely used 16 moves capturing enemy fist, how did this evolution occur? Gu Fei asked. Mountain Splitting Axe was startled. It's us, brother. We're equivalent to scientists and researchers in the field of fighting. Otherwise, do you think that your fighting techniques just fell from the sky? Gu Fei said. There's another point, Gu Fei continued, you have another misunderstanding. What is it? The fighting techniques you've mastered are simple and direct. There aren't too many complicated changes. It's not because it's simple and direct that it's more effective in actual combat. It's just because it's simple and direct that it's easier to master. It's because you don't have time. 2 years as a compulsory soldier, 3 years as a volunteer soldier. All added together, it's no more than 5 years. It's not enough to use all of that time to practice martial arts. Not to mention, you still have more things to master. Gu Fei said. Do you really think that brother over there isn't your opponent? Gu Fei pointed at the Encyclopedia of Wisdom. In terms of fighting level, he's actually above you. It's just that he doesn't have your experience. After all, although we practice martial arts, we haven't even had the experience of seriously injuring someone. For a combat technique that sought to destroy, this flaw had quite a big impact. You're saying that our martial arts aren't up to par in actual combat? That's not right. But if you say that we don't have actual combat experience, then that's right. Of course, the actual combat experience I'm talking about is actual combat with the goal of killing. Mountain Axe was shocked. Don't tell me you have that kind of experience. Gu Fei was even more shocked. Don't joke around. You have to pay with your life for killing someone. Mountain Axe laughed. So you're saying that you also lack actual combat experience? Gu Fei laughed. I do lack it, but we're on different planes. The difference in experience is negligible. If it weren't for the fact that I don't have the strength, I would have already beaten you to the ground. Mountain Axe said, since you know that your lack of strength is a huge disadvantage, how are you going to beat me? After all, this is still a game. You can hit me, but you can't really hurt me. That's why I've been talking to you so much. Gu Fei said. What? When I went behind the rock just now, I secretly put a few grapes in my mouth. I ate them while I was talking to you just now, and now I've finally digested them, Gu Fei said. Actually, I'm a mage, so I don't need strength. What I need is magic. Fuck. Mountain Axe finally realized that he had been tricked. Water-breaking arrow and sniper god, who were on the huge rock, vomited blood when they heard this news. It turned out that Gu Fei hadn't called the Encyclopedia of Wisdom over to kill them, but to attract their attention so that they couldn't affect Gu Fei's digestion of the grapes. Fire resistance, is it? You're finished. Gu Fei raised his left hand, and a ball of lightning gradually condensed in his palm. Chapter 623. Mountain Axe was shocked. Even though he wasn't an expert in the game, he was still familiar with the basics of spell attributes and damage calculation. Gu Fei wasn't wrong. A grandmaster of combat who could withstand 2 of his double flame flash attacks would definitely be equipped with fire-resistant equipment. But now, Gu Fei had switched to using lightning spells, so fire resistance was completely useless. With a flip of his right hand, the Night Streamer sword reappeared in his hand. Even though Thunder Palm could be used empty-handed, it still required a weapon to increase the spell's damage. Gu Fei raised his hand and swung his sword. Mountain Axe, as he said, didn't know much about swordsmanship. He didn't see through this move at all and focused on dodging it. Gu Fei smiled and pulled back his sword. He stepped forward and pushed out the Thunder Palm with his left hand. Splitting Mountain Axe was on guard for this moment. He immediately shrank his abdomen and bent his waist, one arm in front and one in back, one in front of him. With one hand he grabbed Gu Fei's wrist, while the other reached for Gu Fei's shoulder. Be careful. Yi Xiaowu, who was on the big rock, immediately shouted, but it was already too late. Gu Fei smiled at the mountain-splitting axe and said, I'm a mage. Just as he finished speaking, a lightning palm shot out from his palm and hit the center of his abdomen. A strong electric current instantly ran through Mountain Axe's body. Electric sparks flew everywhere like a lantern. Mountain Axe, whose HP was rapidly dropping, only had one thought in his mind, damn, I've been ambushed again. If this was a normal fight, Mountain Axe would have dodged this attack perfectly. But the problem was that this was a game. Gu Fei's Thunder Palm didn't need to be condensed in his palm to hit the opponent. Condensing was just the process of forming the spell. For a normal mage, this was still a 100% long-range attack spell. How could Gu Fei, who had already grasped the electric light and attacked? In the end, when Mountain Axe dodged the palm, releasing the spell meant that his arms suddenly lengthened. How could Mountain Axe dodge this? He could only take a 100% hit. Yi Xiaowu understood the key to this, but it was too late. Of course, he knew what skills Gu Fei had, but how could he know how Gu Fei would use them? For example, in the beginning, Gu Fei had teleported into the air to attack Mountain Axe. If he could have predicted this kind of strategy beforehand, he would have warned Mountain Axe long ago. I'm sorry, I actually don't have time. Gu Fei also apologized. Following that, he did not show any mercy. With a flash of his sword, he quickly reaped the life of the mountain-splitting axe. Gu Fei did not forget that this was not a duel between two people, but a duel between two groups of people. He could play with splitting Mountain Axe here, but the situation of the other elite team members and Jian Nanyu and the others was not too good. The damage of this group of people's arrows was uneven, and most of them posed no threat to these experts. However, they quickly recognized this point and adjusted their positions to concentrate their firepower on the elite squad and Jian Nanyu's group of 7. When more than 10 people's arrows were concentrated on one person, the damage was definitely not to be underestimated. Fuck, they're coming for me again. Yutian Shinming observed the movement of the opponents and hurriedly moved toward the middle of the team. Hearing this, Jian Nanyu hurriedly moved in his direction. With a sword and shield, he could withstand the damage of this kind of volley. However, Glue was also shouting, No, it's me. Jian Nanyu quickly turned to his side. It's me. Yutian Shinming shouted. Glue is over there. Han family young master shouted, Cleric, pull Yutian. Ah, I'm going to die. Yutian Shinming saw a few arrows flying toward him. Regardless of the class of these people, their archery skills were extremely accurate. Although their arrows were not as fast as the archers, it was not easy to dodge them. If there were only one or two of them, Yutian Shinming felt that he might be able to handle it. However, with so many arrows flying toward him, Yutian Shinming had no idea which one to dodge. Pa. Yutian Shinming was hit by 6 arrows on the spot. The second wave of arrows was extremely fast, and the second wave of arrows had already flown out. Yutian Shinming had no confidence in his weak body. Then, he was hit by another 6 arrows. After being hit by 12 arrows, Yutian Shinming closed his eyes and thought that he was going to die. However, the cleric's regeneration felt so warm. Yutian Shinming opened his eyes and saw that he was still alive. He praised, Damn, you're still alive after being hit by 12 arrows. That's awesome. Everyone rolled their eyes. Han family young master glared at him and scolded, Take a good look at your opponent's class. The other side would suddenly combine their attacks and then scatter. This round, they had split their forces into 2, one attacking the glue while the other attacking the heavenly divine cry. The ones attacking the glue were comprised of professional archers, while the ones attacking the heavenly divine cry were just a bunch of miscellaneous professions. With the support of the cleric, Yutian Shinming had no problem dealing damage. On the other hand, if Jian Nanyu didn't arrive in time to help, Glue would have been killed. Brother Yu had also finished sorting out the information of the opponents and was introducing them to everyone. 3 archers, 2 knights, 2 warriors, 2 mages, 2 clerics, 3 thieves, and 2 grandmasters of combat. A total of 14 people. Their classes are very balanced. Oh, Qianli's side is facing 2 archers, 1 cleric, and 1 grandmaster of combat. Ah! The Grandmaster of Combat has been killed by Qianli. When Brother Yu finished his introduction, he saw that Gu Fei had dealt with the mountain-splitting axe with a thunder palm and a series of sword sparks. Then, he turned around and rushed towards them. Brother Yu was excited. Qianli is coming to help. Han family young master's expression didn't change much. He frowned and said, What's the use of him coming? Let's kill our way out and retreat first. Although they had the same number of people, the experts were being suppressed. Although they were unwilling, they had to admit that they were at a disadvantage. It wasn't that they didn't want to retaliate, but they couldn't find a suitable opportunity. We can't run away, Han family young master said in a low voice. Didn't you notice? Regardless of their class, all of them have added agility. It seems like it, their teamwork is too good. Jian Nanyu, who was good at teamwork, also expressed his admiration. Professionals. Han family young master concluded. Then what do we do? Child elite group realized the severity of the situation. Even Han family young master had a rare pessimistic tone. These people have strong fighting qualities, but they don't seem to be very familiar with the game. This might be our only chance. Han family young master said. How do you know? Everyone asked. They don't know how to make use of the specialties of their class. Isn't that enough to explain the problem? Disdain, eternal disdain, even when they were pessimistic. Then what should we do? The few of them seemed to be chatting, but in fact, they had blocked 2 rounds of attacks while they were talking. They kept moving, but they couldn't get out of the enemy's encirclement. Just as Han family young master said, the enemy had added agility, so their overall mobility was above theirs. The warrior and priest in their team had a few short legs, so they could only move at this speed. This was the legendary bucket effect. No matter how high a bucket was, the height of the water it could hold depended on the lowest plank. If we really can't do it, we can only sacrifice the pawn to save the king. Han family young master said the worst case scenario. Fuck. Who's a pawn? Who's a pawn? Unscathed in battle was depressed. Han family young master glanced at him. I'm also a pawn. The short planks who were depressed like unscathed in battle were stunned. That's right. Although Han family young master had always been arrogant, he was indeed a shortcoming in this matter. He was a priest with the golden ratio of intelligence and spirit, but he also had no agility and short legs. Why don't we change our agility equipment? Brother, you suggested. Classes like Imperial Divine Cry, Glue, and Blackwater definitely had equipment that added a lot of agility. Brother Yu's plan was to first coordinate their equipment with each other so that the short-legged players could also increase their speed. It's useless. We can't take care of it. Han family young master shook his head and looked at the others. Actually, most of us have short legs. Everyone looked back. Wasn't that right? In fact, there were only 2 classes that mainly focused on agility in the game. One was an archer, and the other was a thief. Therefore, short legs were the mainstream. Agility classes were less than 1/3 of the total. It was precisely because of this that in normal team battles, everyone had the same mobility. It was unprecedented for a team to be completely suppressed in terms of mobility. Everyone, calm down. Think about the pros and cons of both sides. Han family young master said, if they invest points in agility, their mobility will be guaranteed. However, in terms of firepower, be it damage output or support output, they will be greatly limited. Brother Yu, have you calculated their current damage output? Since the opponents were long-range attacks with bows and arrows, Brother Yu couldn't use identification. Therefore, he could only estimate their damage based on the damage they received after being hit by an arrow. While the others were actively fighting, Brother Yu was frantically sorting out the calculations in his little notebook. Almost there. It's not complete yet, Brother Yu said. Qianli may be our breakthrough point. Han family young master said, everyone noticed Blackwater's situation just now. If it's a close combat, I'm afraid these guys will be even stronger. Therefore, there's one thing I can't figure out. Why do they have the patience to deal with us like this? If they swarmed us all at once, we might have been defeated by now. That might not be the case, right? Unscathed in battle waved the great sword in his hand. He had been unable to retaliate after being shot around by the opponents. He had been holding back his anger. 100 Lives strategist was defeated by the opponent's Grandmaster of Combat just now. Han family young master said calmly. Everyone was speechless. How scary was 100 Lives strategist? Jian Yu and the others knew better. Their team had been taken down by 100 Lives strategist in an instant. While everyone was discussing their strategy, Gu Fei had come to help. However, it was obvious that the opponents did not want Gu Fei to meet up with them. Therefore, they diverted their firepower to intercept him. The crossfire of these people was unimaginable to ordinary players. It could be said that the few of them could reach the level of an archer's arrow formation that completely blocked the opponent's dodging space. When an arrow was shot at the chest, the only way to dodge was to dodge to the left and right or to lie down. However, the opponents had released arrows in advance in the direction of possible dodging. Dodging in that direction was equivalent to sending oneself to the body of the arrow. If it was a normal person, this would be a huge problem. However, it was Gu Fei who had entered the battlefield. The arrows shot by these ordinary non-archer classes did not have any attribute bonuses or skill bonuses. No matter how good their shooting skills were, the speed of the arrows was the same. For Gu Fei, the more accurate one's shooting was, the easier it would be for him to shoot down the arrows. Otherwise, if he were to shoot randomly, he was afraid that they would be able to defeat him. Gu Fei's dark streak sword danced like a ball of purple gas, and those fellows were extremely agile in reloading and firing. As a result, the arrows flying towards Gu Fei were all deflected like flowers, dancing around him. Gu Fei would dodge if he could, block if he couldn't, and take an arrow if he couldn't. As long as he had a clear view of his opponent, Gu Fei really did not care about the arrows shot by magicians. Fuck! Seeing this monster charging over so boldly, the Han family young master and the others had nothing else to say other than this word. The shooting of ordinary classes is no threat to Qianli Drunk. Let's leave him to the professional archers. At that moment, Water-Breaking Arrow sent a message to everyone and jumped off the big rock. 100 Lives strategist had been studying below for a long time, but he really could not find a way to climb up while facing Water-Breaking Arrow and the sniper gods shooting. Previously, Gu Fei wanted him to attract the attention of the two people above. After his goal was achieved and Mountain Axe was killed, Gu Fei waved at him and signaled him to dodge together. Of course, 100 Lives strategist could not run as fast as Gu Fei. After a few steps, he heard the sound of something landing behind him. Water-Breaking Arrow and the others had already jumped off the big rock. Without saying a word, 100 Lives strategist immediately turned around to face them. He had heard all of Gu Fei's criticism of the mountain-splitting axe, and he felt like he was suddenly enlightened. Gu Fei was right. Based on the martial arts he had learned from the 100 Lives Classic, his attainments in combat were definitely above the mountain-splitting axe. The reason why he lost to him was purely because he lacked experience. To be honest, the game happened to be a good opportunity for people like him to accumulate actual combat experience in this aspect. If it were in reality, he probably would not have the opportunity to use the sword that Gu Fei used to slash his crotch, but what about in the game? Such a move was not taboo at all, and it did not cause any substantial damage to people. 100 Lives strategist was not as flexible as Gu Fei. Moreover, the reason why he came to the game was that his students encountered difficulties in the game that they could not defeat, so he coaxed their coach to help them solve the problem. Game accounts were rare, and 100 Lives strategist, a thrifty kid, could not bear to waste it, so he joined these people to fight gangsters in the game. His original intention of entering the game was different from Gu Fei's, so he really did not pay attention to the problems that Gu Fei had thought about and realized. At this moment, after listening to Gu Fei's words, he was suddenly enlightened. Yes, Kung Fu can be used freely in the game, so a lot of previous concerns are completely unnecessary. When 100 Lives strategist heard the sound behind him, he was so excited that he rushed forward like Gu Fei when he first entered the game to fight. Jumping from a rock a few meters high was not a big deal in the game, but it also required some balance skills to maintain a stable landing. Of course, Water-Breaking Arrow and Sniper God had no problem with it. After landing, they skillfully rolled on the ground to reduce the force of the fall, but Yi Xiaowu was a gentle person. How could he do that? After jumping down, he kicked his legs and tried to stand firm, but he was immediately shocked by the impact of the fall, and he staggered forward. This was not a big deal. Most players would jump stupidly like this if they were asked to jump from a few meters high. However, the problem was that 100 Lives strategist was rushing forward, and Yi Xiaowu staggered and fell forward directly into his arms. 100 Lives strategist was in a hurry to have a human sandbag, so how could he be polite? Seeing that Yi Xiaowu had lost his balance, he stretched out his right hand to support something. He immediately went up and lifted his left hand and lowered his right arm. Ah! Yi Xiaowu howled like a pig being slaughtered, and the entire white stone forest was shaken. The players who were fighting monsters, PKNG, and fighting in groups could not help but stop. Even 100 Era's strategist was shocked. He quickly retreated and stared at Yi Xiaowu vigilantly. The pain in the game was not only weakened, but there was also an upper limit. When the pain reached this limit, no matter how much you tossed and turned, you would not feel any more pain. Yi Xiaowu had reached the limit of pain, and it was extremely unbearable. For the first time, Yi Xiaowu hated the simulation that he was so proud of. This pain was too real. Did my arm break? Yi Xiaowu thought and turned to look at his right arm. He saw that the forearm that could not be bent had grown into two parts on his arm. Half of the elbow was still horizontal, but the other half was like a chicken wing that had been folded in. His arm was really broken. Ah! Yi Xiaowu screamed again, but this time, he was scared. His entire forearm was covered in blood. Even if it was a chicken wing sold in the supermarket, no matter if it was fresh or frozen, the blood would be washed away. Fuck, my arm is broken into 3 pieces. Unscathed in battle and the others could see it too. That's too fucking cruel, Yutian Shinming mumbled. Gu Fei also saw it clearly and sucked in a breath of cold air. The Gu family was best at Dragon Fist, and there was a Fire Dragon Fist in Dragon Fist that was a secret of the Gu family. Not only did Gu Fei not know it, he had never even seen it before. This was because this fist technique was extremely strong, and it used offense as defense. Every move and style was full of power, and when it was used, it would either poke acupoints or break bones. In layman's terms, if one was hit, they would either suffer internal or external injuries. This fist technique was not something that people who wanted to die would ask their opponent to use during a spar. The Gu family also followed the trend of the martial arts world. This fist technique was only passed down in the family, and they never used it to spar with others. If one used it, one would be seriously injured, and if one did not hit the injury, this fist technique would lose its meaning, and it would be meaningless to use it. He did not expect this kid to use the Fire Dragon Fist. Gu Fei was excited. He did not have the chance to see this in real life. After weighing the pros and cons in his heart, Gu Fei immediately turned his head to watch the 100 Lives classic practice. If you guys die, I'll avenge you. Gu Fei did not forget to express his stance to the brothers he had abandoned. Fuck fuck fuck. Everyone gave him the middle finger. Chapter 624. At this time, Water-Breaking Arrow and Sniper God had already rushed over to protect Yi Xiaowu from the left and right while continuously shooting arrows at 100 Reincarnation Strategist. The two seemed to be veterans who had been through a lot. This scene didn't scare them at all. Sniper God looked at Yi Xiaowu's forearm that looked like a chicken wing and exclaimed, "Wow, the bones are sticking out. That's real." Yi Xiaowu was no longer howling. There was a limit to the pain and it was completely bearable. The first howl was because it was sudden. Sometimes people would cry out involuntarily when they were suddenly pricked by needles, right? The second howl was purely out of shock. Anyone would be shocked to see their arms suddenly like this. Hearing Sniper God's mumble, he couldn't help but look down. He saw white bones sticking out of the flesh with bits of skin and flesh hanging from them. It was a blurry mess. Yi Xiaowu immediately felt disgusted. A system notification rang in his ears. Player's abdominal pressure is rising and his stomach isn't feeling well. If he doesn't recover in 1 minute, the game will be forcefully cut off. This was the real condition of the human body that the game equipment could detect. Back in Sunset City, Unsworn Sword, the guild leader of 4 Seas, had been warned by the system because his heart was beating too fast. Yi Xiaowu and he were the same, except that one had a heart and the other a stomach. Yi Xiaowu obviously wasn't unfamiliar with this setting. He hurriedly looked away and took out a bottle of water from his pocket to suppress the nausea. Sniper God looked at his actions in surprise. What, did you scare yourself with the game you made? Yi Xiaowu was speechless. What should we do? Water-breaking arrow asked. Healing can't completely heal these kinds of injuries. We have to go back to the main city and find a system healer, Yi Xiaowu said. Heal was a level 40 light priest skill. It was very effective in dealing damage over time, such as reducing the maximum HP of a target. However, his arm was broken so badly that it couldn't be healed with healing. But his HP is dropping and he can't go back. He'll completely recover after he dies. Don't worry. Yi Xiaowu added. Is bandaging effective? Water-breaking arrow asked again. It will if the technique is correct. Yi Xiaowu nodded. Call Little Chin over. Sniper God said. Hold on, Water-breaking arrow said to Yi Xiaowu and sent the message. Of course, he wasn't talking about willpower. Yi Xiaowu switched his main hand to his left hand and waved his staff to heal himself. He asked Sniper God, who's Little Chin? He used to be a medic in our team. I'm not skilled, so let him come. Sniper God smiled and continued to fire at Yi Xiaowu. The 100-generation strategist was suppressed by the combined firepower of the water-breaking arrow and Sniper God. For a moment, he couldn't move forward. At this moment, Gu Fei rushed over and asked excitedly, is it the Fire Dragon Fist? Yes. Of Assassin. It's an honor to meet you. Gu Fei said. It seems a little cruel. Yi Xiaowu's priest robe was already stained with blood, and there was a pool of it on the ground. Encyclopedic Eminence couldn't bear to see this. Have you never seen blood before? Although everyone would hold back when competing in Kung Fu and would not go all out, the nature of this event was that it was an activity where both sides were trying to kill each other. Once an accident happened, the consequences would be quite tragic. Nosebleeds, Gu Fei said. Gu Fei was speechless. Even children often got nosebleeds. Nosebleeds. Gu Fei was speechless. Even children often got nosebleeds. Look, the game is exaggerating. How can a person bleed so much? He should have died long ago. Gu Fei comforted Gu Fei. Yi Xiaowu spat out another mouthful of blood. Unexpectedly, Sniper God agreed with Gu Fei and nodded. It's a bit exaggerated. Didn't you think about this when you made the game? A person's HP is limited. Even if you can't stop the bleeding, you can't keep bleeding like this. Sniper God glanced at Yi Xiaowu's broken arm. Blood was still gushing out. Gu Fei nodded. That's right. A person's blood is usually about 7 to 8% of their body weight. Look at how skinny he is. He probably only weighs about 50 kilograms. I think he has lost about 10 kilograms of blood. Sniper God shook his head. That's too much. I think it's 8 kilograms at most. 8 caddies is still a big deal. I'll give him an extra 120 caddies. His HP will be calculated at 8%, so that's 9.6 caddies. I'll give him an extra 4 tails to calculate 10 caddies, but he'll lose 8 caddies. Is that reasonable? It's not reasonable. If he lost 5 kilograms, he should die, Sniper God said. Look, he's lost 8 kilograms. It's fake. It's all fake, Gu Fei said to Gu Fei Arrow. You know all this. Gu Fei Arrow was impressed. A little. Gu Fei pretended to be cool. While the three of them were discussing, Yi Xiaowu's blood flow had obviously accelerated his blood loss. Water-breaking arrow, who was listening on the side, rolled his eyes. While they were chatting, Sniper God kept shooting arrows at Gu Fei and 100 Reincarnations Jingluan. The two of them kept dodging as they replied to each other. 100 Reincarnations Jingluan had hesitated just now, and Gu Fei was trying to persuade him, so the two of them did not rush forward. Now that the talk was over, Yi Xiaowu's injuries were labeled as fake. Bai Jingluan's fighting spirit was reignited. Go! Let me see your fire dragon fist, Gu Fei encouraged. As the two advanced together, it was difficult for water-breaking arrow and Sniper God to block them. However, the two of them were archers with rich battle experience. If they couldn't block it, then they would retreat. While retreating, they would continue to attack. Thus, the two of them retreated while continuing to attack. In the end, after retreating a few steps, water-breaking arrow shouted again, "Fuck, move the wounded away." Fuck. Sniper God saw Yi Xiaowu standing there stupidly and immediately came over to pull him. Brother, follow the organization. No, no. I'm interrupted. I'm interrupted. Yi Xiaowu shouted. Who said that nothing could happen to a person who was bleeding profusely? Wasn't his health constantly dropping? He was relying on his healing skills to pull him back, but he couldn't even pull him back. Sniper God pulled him back and interrupted his healing skills twice. His health plummeted. It's already broken. Sniper God thought that he was talking about his arm. My skill. My skill is broken. Yi Xiaowu yelled. Sniper God wasn't new to the game and knew some of the game's settings and terminology. After a brief daze, he realized what Yi Xiaowu was talking about. He hurriedly shouted at water-breaking arrow, "Cover him and wait for the wounded to move away." Water-breaking arrow strode toward Gu Fei. I'll deal with him. After all, water-breaking arrow had fought Gu Fei before and knew some of Gu Fei's attack methods, so he chose the tough one. In Sniper God's eyes, while Gu Fei was an expert, at least he didn't break his arm. Water-breaking arrow was saving the ruthless one for himself. Sniper God's heart was pounding. Even though these soldiers weren't in-game classes and were only proficient in one fighting style, they all had their own strengths. Sniper God used to be a sniper in the team, and he was the best at shooting. Even though his close combat skills weren't bad, Mountain Axe was one of the best close combat players in the team. Yet, he seemed to have lost to Gu Fei. It seemed that these combat scientists weren't all that good at bragging. Sniper God knew that he wasn't as good as Mountain Axe, so he couldn't help but feel uneasy facing such an opponent. But it was one thing to be nervous, and another to fight. Uneasiness would only make Sniper God more careful when fighting. If the difference in theory could determine victory or defeat, then there wouldn't be any competition in the world. Sniper God pulled out a gleaming dagger from his pocket. It wasn't actually a top-tier piece of equipment, but the shape and size of the dagger was to his liking. After these people entered the game, they added points and chose equipment very similar to Gu Fei. They all picked up the weapons that were convenient for them first. Sniper God wasn't Yi Wu, after all. It wouldn't be easy for 100-era statecraft to break his opponent's arm. Moreover, Dragon Fist didn't have to break someone's arm. It depended on the player's choice in actual combat. The two of them exchanged punches and kicks. 100-era statecraft didn't seem to be at a disadvantage even though he was bare-handed. Their PvP was a competition of real combat skills. It was meaningless to compare the stats of their weapons and equipment. Sniper God had a knife in his hand, and everyone subconsciously thought that he was more lethal. As for the damage of his knife, it was actually not as good as a punch from encyclopedic classics, which the two of them had probably forgotten at this point. Gu Fei casually dispelled water-breaking arrow's attack. Half of his attention was on 100-era statecraft. He was sometimes amazed, sometimes thinking, and sometimes pondering. Water-breaking arrow was quite depressed. He didn't feel that the gap between him and Gu Fei was so big. But now, he seemed to have dispelled his attack absent-mindedly. Water-breaking arrow, on the other hand, thought it was better this way. He had never expected to be able to defeat Gu Fei in a one-on-one fight. He and Sniper God had only wanted to stop the two of them for a while and wait for Yi Wu to recover. Therefore, Gu Fei only cared about the two of them fighting. He didn't focus on killing himself, which was why Water-breaking arrow and the others wanted to buy time. Gu Fei, on the other hand, was simply watching the Fire Dragon Fist of the 100 Lives Classic. The opponent in front of him, the half-dead Yi Xiaowu, and the brothers who were not in good condition were no longer in his sight. The group of people who were attacking the elite party and Jiannan Yudo's group of 7 changed after receiving the Water-breaking arrow's message. 3 archers were quickly pulled away, followed by a cleric who suddenly turned around and went over to the other side. The firepower of an archer was on a completely different level from that of an ordinary player. Once the 3 archers were deployed, the pressure on everyone was instantly reduced. Apart from that, they were also a little disappointed. The more difficult opponents had all gone to deal with Gu Fei and 100 Era's strategist, while the more difficult opponents were dealing with a bunch of so-called experts. Archers had a long shooting range, so the 3 of them only needed a few steps to enter the range where they could attack Gu Fei and 100 Reincarnations Jinglin. The 3 of them immediately opened fire at the same time, causing Gu Fei and 100 Reincarnations Jinglin to panic. Water-breaking arrow and Sniper God immediately tried to get away from the close combat situation and changed to a long distance. However, when facing opponents like Gu Fei and 100 Era Statecraft, it wasn't as simple as retreating if they wanted to. If they wanted to retreat, they had to pay the price of 1 or 2 attacks. Water-breaking arrow was worried about Gu Fei's magic damage, and Sniper God naturally didn't dare to pay the price when he saw that Yi Xiaowu had lost 2 kilograms of blood. The other priest, on the other hand, went straight to Yi Xiaowu. It was Comrade Chen, the health worker who had been called by Water-breaking arrow to help Yi Xiaowu bandage his wounds. Yi Xiaowu saw through the priest's intentions and was full of expectations. He was madly trying to save his own health, which wouldn't last long. There seemed to be unlimited health in the game, but magic power was definitely limited. Yi Xiaowu looked at the priest eagerly. Suddenly, a black shadow appeared behind the priest. Yi Xiaowu was shocked and hurriedly shouted, "Watch out!" There were battles everywhere on the field. Who knew who he was yelling at? Everyone subconsciously slowed down. Some of them looked around and saw the black shadow that rushed out like a gust of wind behind the priest Chen. It also revealed that although Yi Xiaowu was a game designer, he didn't have much combat experience in the game. During the battle royale, danger could be detected at any time. Who would yell, "Watch out"? Just call the person's name. Little Chen. The other people who discovered the situation were very experienced and directly shouted Little Chen's name. Little Chen quickly turned his head. Sword Demon just happened to enter the fog sneak attack phase at this moment. There was no one behind him. Little Chen was a health worker in the army. Although there were some things that needed to be mastered appropriately, a person's energy was ultimately limited. Little Chen's main work energy was in the area of medical care. How could he have high attainments in shooting, fighting, and so on? He could only be considered qualified in these areas. He wasn't on the same level as other combat personnel. Not to mention something as murderous as sensing things, he didn't have that intuition at all. So when Sword Demon disappeared, he immediately didn't know what happened. But soon, a figure appeared in front of him. It wasn't 1, but 2. This time, even Sword Demon was surprised. He didn't expect that there would be a thief hiding next to this priest. But Sword Demon kept sneaking and then suddenly appeared. He was in front of him in an instant. This person obviously wasn't fully prepared. This defense was very hasty. In fact, Sword Ghost's Fog Ambush was a skill that Yi Xiaowu had pointed out in advance that they needed to focus on guarding against. Water-breaking arrow had also made a very targeted counter to this skill, so he had already informed everyone about how to guard against it. But it was useless to use this method at the moment. That method was only for hiding. But at this time, Sword Demon's target wasn't him. What could he hide from? At this time, what he needed was to block. He needed to block this knife for little Chen, who didn't know what was going on. This was a defense that was completely based on reflexes and experience. It wasn't perfect, but it didn't let the damage of Fog Sneak Attack explode completely. However, the impact of Fog Sneak Attack was still there. The thief who appeared and the priest behind him, little Chen, were hit and sent flying. Sword Demon didn't have the slightest hesitation. His target didn't change at all. He used swift movement and immediately flew toward little Chen. Little Chen got up to face the enemy. Although he was only a medic, he also knew everything a soldier should know. Shooting, fighting, his level was originally above Sword Demon's. But at this time, it was his class that was broken. He was a priest. He could shoot arrows, punch, and swing knives, but Sword Demon completely ignored him. How much damage could a priest do with these attacks? Sword Demon saw this, so he used the most barbaric fighting method in the game, one knife for one knife. There was no technique and no dodging. It was just a stance style of, I hit you, you hit me back. Little Chen wanted to dodge Sword Demon's attacks, but when faced with an opponent who didn't care about his punches, knives, and swords, it was really difficult to dodge all of the opponent's attacks. At least, little Chen didn't manage to do it. Sword Demon's long kill short sigh quickly chopped down on him. Although he also took a few punches and kicks from little Chen, this change was completely disproportionate. Sword Demon quickly harvested little Chen's life. The others wanted to save him, but it was too late. The thief who was killed by Fog Sneak Attack with little Chen just got up and rushed in front of Sword Demon, stabbing fiercely. Sword Demon still didn't dodge. Although the person in front of him was no longer a priest, Sword Demon also knew that a thief who had been hit by Fog Sneak Attack definitely didn't have much health left. Sword Demon also backhanded with his knife. He began to fight with his knife again. Last time, it was a competition of damage. This time, it was a competition of life. Although the other party had more combat experience than Sword Demon had more online game experience than them. This was a battle, but at the same time, it was also an online game. Sword Demon's experience was very accurate and reasonable at this time, but the other party's experience was spoiling things at this time. He thrust his saber at the Sword Ghost's vital point in the chest, thinking that after the Sword Ghost dodged, he would throw the Sword Ghost to the ground with a backhand and deal with it as he pleased. Unless the other party was caught off guard, it was impossible not to dodge a knife that stabbed at the heart. This was a deep-rooted idea that he had developed in actual combat. If he dodged, he had a backup plan. If he didn't dodge, he would be insta-killed. As a result, when his knife stabbed at Sword Demon's chest, the other party also took this opportunity to stab his waist. He suddenly realized a problem. Fuck, even if I stab the heart here, I won't be insta-killed. I still have to do math problems. The math problems told him that his health was already 0, so he could only die. The expression on his face showed that he was helpless. It wasn't that he didn't understand, it wasn't that he didn't know, he just needed to adapt. A sneak attack killed 2 people in an instant. Sword Demon's results were clearly better than Gu Fei's. Yutian Shinming shouted at the top of his lungs, Sword Demon, you're so cool. Huorini said, isn't the word cool too sarcastic for him? Doesn't he mind? Everyone looked at him, and Huorini quickly shrank his neck. Sword Demon didn't feel the slightest bit proud. He knew that luck played a big part in his success. He couldn't be sure what the result would be if he tried again with 2 other people. After taking care of the 2 people, Sword Demon immediately rushed forward. Many arrows were already aimed at him. Sword Ghost had long since seen through the archery skills of these people. No matter how flashy his movements were, it would be useless. Therefore, he had already calculated his escape route before he made his move. At this moment, after running wildly for a few steps, he immediately shrank behind a white rock, not even revealing a foot. Chapter 625. When the conditions permitted, there would always be someone around the medics to protect them. This was a habit they had developed when they were soldiers, and it hadn't changed in the game. When Little Chen came over to help the wounded, the thief immediately stood beside him to protect him. He didn't expect that not only would he not be able to protect Little Chen, but he would also lose his life. The group of people was furious. Although they knew that this was a game and that the three of them were still alive at the revival point, the deaths of the three of them still angered the veterans. Even when they were carrying out the most difficult mission in the past, their team had never sacrificed 3 people at once. Now, they were facing a group of commoners in the game, and they were basically in control of the situation, yet they had lost 3 people. This was too much of a blow to their pride. They chased after the sword demon and shot at him. Some of them were clearly shot, but the other party didn't die and hid behind a rock. Everyone's hearts tightened. On the other hand, Yi Xiaowu didn't have anyone to help him. His mana was about to run out, and he could only let his life drain away. Although he had many ways to deal with this injury, he couldn't help but execute them unconditionally. Water-breaking arrow and sniper god were the 2 closest to him. In fact, they all knew how to bandage a simple wound, but Yi Xiaowu's injury looked quite serious, so they didn't have much confidence. Now that the medics, Little Chen, wasn't here, they could only make do. An archer who came over to surround Yi Xiaowu ran to his side, holding a hemostatic bandage in his hand. When he saw Yi Xiaowu's broken arm, he was startled and said, "This is a comminuted fracture. I don't know how to heal it." "Don't worry, it's fine as long as you can stop the bleeding," Yi Xiaowu said. "How do you stop it?" the archer asked. Yi Xiaowu fainted. "Do whatever you know how to do." The archer nodded. He saw a wooden stick on the ground and picked it up. He picked up Yi Xiaowu's broken arm and reattached it. He folded the stick into 2 pieces to use as a splint. The hemostatic bandage quickly wrapped around Yi Xiaowu's entire forearm. After tying a knot, he hung it around Yi Xiaowu's neck. "I didn't connect it correctly. There will definitely be repercussions," the simple veteran said worriedly. "Don't worry. When the time comes, we'll find the system's priest and we'll be able to completely recover," Yi Xiaowu said to him. Yi Xiaowu knew that it wasn't because of how amazing his technique was. It was mainly because of the system's assistance. It was just like the system's correction for archery. The system wouldn't demand that the player's technique be accurate. It just needed to be good enough. The bleeding stopped, and Yi Xiaowu's HP stopped falling. She cast 2 more healing spells to bring her HP to the maximum, and then she hurriedly ate some fruits to replenish her mana. When this person saw that Yi Xiaowu was fine, he immediately returned to the battle. The crossfire of the 3 archers freed water-breaking arrow and sniper god from Gu Fei and 100 Era's Jinglin's melee attacks. The 2 of them retreated and immediately pulled out their crossbows to fire. The 5 archers displayed their high mobility and accurate archery together to fight Gu Fei and 100 Era's Jingluan. Gu Fei was fine. He wasn't too far behind the opponents in terms of speed, so the opponents didn't dare to be too presumptuous. 100 Era's Jingluan, on the other hand, was having a hard time. His speed was no match for any of the 5 archers. The opponents were running and shooting at the same time, obviously trying to kite him to death. Yi Xiaowu knew that he would most likely become a burden at this time, so he retreated to a corner while chewing on a fruit. He wouldn't let Gu Fei and 100 Era's Jingluan reach him in just a few steps. On the other side, after the 3 archers left the team, the pressure on the young master of the Han family and the others was greatly reduced. They were even more motivated to fight when they saw the sword ghost kill the other 2 archers with his bare hands. On the other hand, the opponents were also wary of the sword ghost's unpredictable and ferocious movements. They sent 2 archers to search the white rock where the sword ghost was hiding. "It's our turn," the Han family young master said in a deep voice. "I believe everyone noticed the sword demon's attack just now," the Han family young master said. The Han family's young master said, "These people are indeed very strong in terms of combat, but because they are too strong, their minds can't adjust for a moment. In terms of gaming, they are complete newbies. We'll see how we make use of them, the Han family young master said, and the others nodded. At this time, the number of opponents they had to face had dropped sharply. 3 archers were sent away, 2 were killed by the sword demon, and the other 2 were killed by the sword demon. Half of the original 16 people were sent away, leaving only 9 people. Over here. Under young Master Han's command, they picked up another pushover. A bunch of experts pounced on the remaining cleric like wolves and tigers. Hold on. Someone in the opponent's formation roared. The cleric seemed to have learned something from Little Chen's sacrifice. He didn't stand there and wait for the opponents to bully him. Instead, he ran and dodged. At the same time, the 2 sorcerers in the opponent's formation attacked from the left and right, swinging their arms. This movement was so confusing that even experienced sorcerers like Yutian Shenming and the Flaming Cloak didn't realize that the opponents were actually casting spells. They only realized it when the flames on their heads flashed. Fuck. The people cursed and dodged. Some of the spells hit their targets, and some missed. The cleric hurried to heal the people's HP. Yutian Shenming mumbled gloomily, "What the fuck is this? They're throwing grenades." Dao Xiangmu, who was standing beside him, saw that the 2 sorcerers were holding crossbows in their left hands, but they were throwing their staffs in their right hands, as if they were going to throw the staffs out. This was obviously a technique used to throw grenades. Old Lei, Dalei, well done. The 2 sorcerers' grenades had blown up the formation of the Han family young masters group, and they were highly praised by the organization. Charge! A soldier waved his hand. The Han family young master and the others quickly focused their attention on the 2 warriors, but all 9 of them charged at them at the same time. Fuck, this is charge. The people cursed. It turned out that the opponents weren't instructing the warriors to use charge, but to charge at the enemy's formation. The misunderstanding caused by the difference in culture caused everyone to curse non-stop. However, the battle was becoming more and more intense. The 9 opponents were already prepared to engage in a melee with each other. Stop them, charge this way, the Han family young master yelled. Flaming Cloak finally had a chance to show off his skills. Although he had dropped a few levels, he still had all his equipment. The skills that he could use in the past could still be reproduced. He immediately waved his staff and ignited a wall of fire. Then, he chanted non-stop. Heavenly Flame Wheel and Fire 3,000 layers of flames also spread out. The battlefield was engulfed in a sea of flames, isolating the 5 opponents. Although it could only slow them down for a few seconds, it was still very important to them. On the other side of the team, Unscathed in Battle and South Sword took the lead and charged at the enemy warriors. Yutian Shenming and Glue fired their arrows at the other 2, while Brother Yu and Unrivaled Lucky Star cast their blessings on the others and prepared to engage in a melee like warriors. The experts had realized that it was useless to play PvP with these people. They could only act shamelessly. They had nowhere to hide when they charged at them, so they could only compete with their equipment. This kind of fighting style, which was originally despised by these experts, had now become their only chance of winning. Even the sword demon had used it, so how could these people not put on airs? Apart from Gu Fei and the others, who were from different planes of existence, the sword demon was the strongest player among the players. The enemy warrior slashed at him with a heavy sword, but Unscathed in Battle didn't dodge or slash. Instead, he used his head to block the attack, and the 2 swords in his hands also slashed at the enemy. This person dodged Unscathed in Battle's 2 swords and took the opportunity to get close to Unscathed in Battle. He threw away the heavy sword in his hand, grabbed Unscathed in Battle's arm, and threw Unscathed in Battle to the ground. Brother Yu rushed over to help, but the opponent kicked Brother Yu and made him stumble. The Han family young master quickly cast 2 healing spells, giving 1 each to Unscathed in Battle and 1 to Brother Yu. On Jian Nanyo's side, he hid behind his shield and charged forward. The opponent dodged to the side and kicked Jian Nanyo's waist, causing Jian Nanyu to stagger. The opponent attacked head-on, and the dignified warrior was actually using a dagger. It seemed that these veterans were more familiar with this kind of weapon that was easy to carry. It couldn't be helped. In the parallel world, there were all kinds of weapons, and only daggers were considered one of the weapons they would use in actual combat. Jian Nanyu, who was staggering, had just regained his footing when the warrior rushed over and punched him in the face. Then, the warrior held Jian Nanyu's left shoulder and accurately stabbed him in the heart. In the end, Jian Nanyu opened his arms and directly hugged this guy. This warrior had spent points on agility, so he really wasn't Jian Nanyu's match in strength. After being hugged, his right hand that was holding the dagger was also clamped in his chest and couldn't be pulled out. Unable to break free, the veteran suddenly raised his head and slammed it into Jian Nanyu's face. Jian Nanyu's nose was bleeding. Furious, he shook his head and hit the opponent's head too. In comparison, Azure Blade, who had greater strength, dealt more damage. The two of them even turned their heads into weapons. Bang! 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 They fought fiercely against each other. The Han family young master was at ease in the array. He cast healing spells on his sword from time to time while he looked down on Unscathed in Battle, who was still lying on the ground. "You're really useless." Unscathed in Battle's arm had been twisted after he was thrown over. Obviously, this was a professional technique. At this moment, Unscathed in Battle could only gnaw on the ground. He couldn't exert any strength with his arm that had been twisted, nor could he turn his body. His other hand was grabbing the air. Fight! When Imperial Heaven Shinming saw that Jian Nanyu's fighting style seemed to be effective, he suddenly stopped shooting arrows, and with a few strides, he pounced on the warrior. The warrior was really quick. He turned around and punched Yutian Shinming, who was flying towards him, in the face. He fell to the ground with a ouch. However, this punch loosened Unscathed in Battle's arm. Unscathed in Battle hurriedly pulled hard. This warrior, who had also added agility, was also in a tragic situation when faced with Unscathed in Battle's violence. He was ruthlessly dragged to the ground by Unscathed in Battle. Unscathed in Battle nimbly flipped over and rode on this person. He really didn't have the skills to twist someone's arm and make them unable to get up, so he could only use this shameless method of relying on his own weight. The veteran who was being ridden by Unscathed in Battle almost fainted from anger. His strength was far inferior to Unscathed in Battle. Now that he was being ridden and pressed down, how could he get up? Unscathed in Battle laughed out loud. He grabbed his sword and was about to slash at Unscathed in Battle when a rogue jumped out from the side and stabbed at Unscathed in Battle. However, Unscathed in Battle didn't care at all. "You stab him," he stabbed him. The rogue was so depressed that he was about to faint. He thought to himself, what the hell is going on? In this kind of chaotic battle, the lack of a cleric was a huge disadvantage for the veterans. Jian Nanyu and Unscathed in Battle were both fighting hand to hand. However, they had the support of the Han family young master, so their health was actually very full. Even though the opponents also had a cleric, they couldn't accumulate any experience in this class no matter how many battles they went through. The only cleric that the veterans had was terrifyingly inexperienced. Even 5 clerics combined would be no match for the Han family young master's efficiency. Yi Xiaowu was slightly stronger than him, but he noticed that the situation wasn't right. That was why he was rushing over with his broken arm. Apart from these 4, there was also a Grandmaster of Combat veteran. He was beating up unrivaled Lucky Star, Inakami, and Lin Sinsen. However, it was useless. Just beating them up wouldn't kill them. There were 2 clerics among the 3 of them. Even if Lucky Star grasped the timing and accurately interrupted the cleric's recovery, he couldn't interrupt the other. Moreover, the veterans' gaming experience was pitiful. They couldn't even tell if a cleric was casting a skill. "Help me." While the battle was going on, Huolini finally let the opponents circle around him after blocking them for a while. The place was flat, not a street, so he couldn't seal off too many people. Seeing that the 4 of them had circled around him, Huolini didn't dare to face them head-on. he crawled over to meet up with the rest of the team. PvP between experts had never gone through so uneventfully, especially between Jian Nanyu and Zhang Wushang. One of them had a nosebleed, while the other's face was covered in mud. Fortunately, they had managed to turn the tables in the end. The two warriors had been captured by them in an extremely shameless manner and had been trampled to death just like that. Huolini hurried over, followed by 2 paladins and 2 magicians. After this battle, unscathed in battle and Southblade's confidence skyrocketed. One wiped the blood from his nose, while the other wiped the mud from his face. They looked at each other and smiled. It feels good to be strong. After saying that, they charged toward the group of 4. This time, they felt that the swords in their hands were troublesome, so they kept them in their pockets. The 2 of them were like wrestlers, ready to tackle someone. However, after witnessing the miserable state of the 2 warriors, these players didn't dare to be careless. They didn't give the 2 warriors a chance to get close to them. Instead, they circled around the 2 warriors, attacking them with kicks, slaps, and stabs. However, with the support of a superior priest, this kind of strategy was useless other than killing time. The experts gradually relaxed. It turned out that the battle wasn't as difficult as they had imagined. This was all because they had come into contact with Gu Fei too many times, causing them to have a strong psychological shadow when facing such an opponent. However, a very important fact was that these people did not have the Dark Stream sword, nor did they have Gu Fei's frightening damage output. Under Gu Fei's ferocious damage output, the cleric class was nothing more than a decoration. However, in this chaotic battle, due to the presence of the cleric, even though his side appeared to be in a difficult situation, it was still more than enough to hold on. Attack their clerics first. Yi Xiaowu, who had arrived at the scene, cried out helplessly when he saw the chaotic battle. With this reminder, the veterans immediately realized the current situation. If they didn't get rid of the clerics first, they wouldn't be able to fight to the end. However, even after the plan was set, 2 players still asked, which one is the cleric? Blazing Cloak, boom! Han family young master shouted. Blazing Cloak was stunned. He immediately understood that Han family young master was going to use the advantage of having a cleric to the fullest. Without hesitation, he started lighting up the area. Everyone on the ground was engulfed in a sea of flames. Zhan Wushang and South Sword were inspired. They didn't care anymore. They rolled up their sleeves and used whirlwind slash, slashing around in the wind. Fuck. Yutian Shenming was almost hit by unscathed in battle's attacks. He broke out in a cold sweat and quickly moved closer to Han family young master. Yutian Shenming reckoned that no matter how presumptuous this guy was, he wouldn't dare to attack Han family young master. The chaotic battle had turned into a fight to the death. The veterans were at their wits' end against these hooligans. Yi Xiaowu wanted to come over and lend a hand, but when he was about to get close, Glue suddenly shot a cold arrow at him. He was so shocked that he realized he wouldn't be of much help even if he came over. He wasn't strong enough to begin with, and now he was a disabled man. These experts all had very strong equipment. Any one of them would be enough to deal with him. He would only be a burden if he went over. Yi Xiaowu didn't know whether he should go or not. Seeing that his people were about to be played to death by these hooligans, he had no choice but to send a message to Broken Arrow, things aren't looking good. Let's retreat. It was quite easy for Broken Arrow and the other 4 archers to deal with Gu Fei and Elixir Jinglin. Except for someone who was almost caught by Gu Fei's teleportation, nothing dangerous happened. But he also saw the situation on the other side. He didn't expect his people to be beaten so badly in close combat. Seeing that they wouldn't have a good ending, he made up his mind after a brief discussion with Sniper God. Retreat. A long battle was disadvantageous, but in fact, the veterans had the upper hand in punching and kicking. It was just that they didn't have enough output to kill their opponents. Now that they had received the order, it wasn't difficult for them to withdraw. After several people quickly met up, Old Thunder and Big Thunder threw 2 spells as if they were throwing grenades, and went to pick up the disabled Yi Xiaowu. The 5 archers were the best reflection of their strength at the moment. They had speed, technique, awareness, and skills. The 5 of them took up the task of covering the rear. While shooting arrows to suppress Gu Fei's pursuit, they covered their own people and quickly retreated. Damn it, where are you going? Yutian Shinming jumped to chase them. Han family young master glanced at him. Go by yourself. Let's go together. Yutian Shinming was excited. No agility. After Jian Nan said that, he suddenly lay on the ground. How tiring. After playing the game for so long, this PK was the most tiring. Chapter 626. The biggest advantage of having agility was that they could always run away when they couldn't win. Even Yi Xiaowu, who was supposed to be a normal person, had an extraordinary agility compared to a normal cleric. Perhaps it was because of his stat points or equipment, but at least he wouldn't become the weakest member of the team. After noticing the movement of his opponent, Azure Flower was the first to give up on the idea of giving chase and lay down on the ground. Unscathed in battle followed closely behind and also sat down on the ground. Tired, truly tired. The feeling of being relieved of a heavy burden was obviously due to the release of the intense tension in their hearts. As for their physical fatigue, it was nothing to them who had just gone through a huge battle of reorganizing and replying to their letters. However, in terms of mental fatigue, no one could surpass Han family young master. As the chaotic battle unfolded, especially when the group of people started to attack without distinguishing between friend and foe, Han family young master's healing spell was extremely fast and accurate. Both Aneo Xiangmu and Lin Sensen, who were also clerics, felt dizzy. The fatigue that Han family young master experienced from being highly focused could even affect his mind and body. After heaving a sigh of relief, he immediately took out a bottle of wine from his pocket and gulped it down. That's too scary. Ineo Xiangmu and Lin Sensen stared at this abnormal cleric. The 2 of them had already come to a conclusion. If the 7 of them were to face the child elite group head-on, even if the other party didn't have a drunk Qianli, the 7 of them would still be unable to escape the fate of defeat. Because the other party still had another abnormal cleric. Other than Qianli, the 2 parties were on par in other aspects. However, in the aspect of the cleric, Ineo Xiangmu and Lin Sensen felt that they had already lost. Everyone who had just gone through a huge battle rested silently. Even the combative Gu Fei didn't chase after them. His agility was enough for him to chase after them and stir up some trouble, but he also knew very well that he really couldn't do anything to this group of people alone. Even if he had the help of encyclopedic strategist, it still wouldn't work. After all, the opponents were not ordinary players. Everyone stood there in a daze, watching those guys leave. Finally, Brother Yu realized something. He looked around and shouted, "Where's the sword demon?" Sword demon had just hidden behind a rock. A thief and a grandmaster of combat had passed by, but in the end, there was no sound. Everyone hurriedly turned around and ran to the stone, but they did not even see a shadow. Sword demon, where are you? Brother Yu shouted in the channel. I'm back. Sword demon sent a message. He's dead. Brother Yu was shocked. No, said the sword demon. Then where did you go? I saw you. Sword demon said. Everyone looked around and saw in one direction. Sword demon's figure gradually revealed itself from stealth. Where are those 2? Everyone was shocked, thinking to themselves, could it be that they were killed by Sword Demon again? Unscathed in battle and Southern Sword had spent a lot of effort to kill the 2 of them. It could be said that they had a deep understanding of these guys' skills. If it wasn't for the cleric constantly healing them, they would have lost half of their HP after killing one person. It would have been difficult to escape death. And Sword Demon actually killed the 2 of them in a 1 versus 2 situation without a cleric? I shook them off. Sword Demon replied as he had already arrived in front of everyone. You shook them off. There was no need to send a message, he asked face to face. Sword Demon nodded his head. Everyone was speechless, understanding in their hearts what was going on. What else could he do? If he couldn't beat them, he would run. Sword Demon's agility compared to these people was a point higher. Then what about those two guys? Everyone looked around, thinking that there was no need to shake them off so cleanly, right? Yutian Shinming tightened his grip on the arrow in his hand. If he could pick up the remaining two to vent his anger, it would be good. Yutian Shinming had taken a lot of punches and kicks in the chaotic battle just now, but he wasn't able to kill one of them like unscathed in battle and the others, which made him quite unhappy. Those two guys seemed to be lost. Sword Demon said. Lost? Everyone was surprised. Brother Yu and the other members of the child elite group all looked at Yutian Shinming. Like Yutian? How is that possible? Han family young master sneered. This is a group of people who have been in the army, right? And it seems like they have actual combat experience. How could they be like Yutian who has no sense of direction? It's probably because they haven't entered the game for long and aren't used to it yet. Everyone nodded. They do look like newbies, and they're all uncles, so it'll take them a bit longer to get used to it. These newbies' levels aren't low. Brother Yu interrupted. Everyone nodded. Whenever they had the chance, they would use appraisal to identify their opponent's strength. In terms of levels, none of them were below level 40. They're already level 40, but still so inexperienced. Someone suddenly felt that this phenomenon was a bit abnormal. Level 40 wasn't the best in the game, but they definitely weren't newbies. It usually took a few months to reach level 40, so how could they not be used to the game? They should have just reached level 40, Han family young master said. Why? It's not the first time that guy has caused trouble for us. Other than water-breaking arrow, we've never seen these people before. But do you remember that when Sword Demon was being followed, I already said that other than him, water-breaking arrow, and apple cider vinegar, there must be another person, Han family young master said. There's also Silvermoon and No Smiler. Jian Nan and the others interrupted. At that time, they hadn't gotten Silvermoon out yet. No Smiler should have been roped in at the same time as Silvermoon, Han family young master said. You mean that these people were already there at that time, but because their levels were low, no helpers appeared? Brother Yu asked. That's right. Han family young master nodded. That was a while. Brother Yu recalled. But since then, they've already reached level 40. Isn't that a bit too much? They might not have been level 0 at that time. They might have been over level 30. Anyway, I'm guessing that after that guy decided to deal with Qianli, he started to prepare this group of people. Everyone can see this group of people, right? They definitely haven't experienced the game at all. Maybe they entered the game just for this matter. As for the middleman, it should be water-breaking arrow. He was one of the people playing the game, and coincidentally, he was Hengchen Yixiao's friend. Therefore, Hengchen Yixiao hoped that he could pull his old comrades into the game to help him deal with Qianli. These people have been immersed in leveling up ever since they entered the game. I don't need to say much about their perseverance, right? In addition, in terms of combat, they are far stronger than normal players. Moreover, they have Hengchen Yixiao's help. If I remember correctly, didn't Brother Yu say that this guy is number 1 on the leveling efficiency leaderboard? Qianli is ranked below him, Han family young master analyzed. Qianli only plays for 2 to 3 hours a day, Yutian Shinming protested. Do you know what efficiency is? Han family young master gave him a sidelong glance. Also, if these people are training in a group, I don't think normal players can compete with them in terms of teamwork, right? Han family young master continued, in short, they aren't normal players. Normal thinking won't work on them. A bunch of uncles, playing games so much. Don't they need to work? Yutian Shinming muttered. You don't need to worry about that. He was looked down upon again. Everyone just needs to remember that we have a group of troublesome enemies. Today's result is not bad. Brother Yu expressed his relief, none of us died. They lost a total of 5 people. Don't be so optimistic. These people are obviously overestimating themselves. They thought the game was too simple. After entering the game, they only focused on leveling up. Their goal was probably to reach level 40. After all, level 40 and level 39 are completely different concepts. These people acted hastily when they reached level 40. But after this battle, they probably understood that the game isn't as easy as they thought. There is a set of rules here, and they have to change their mindset. Han family young master said. Accumulating experience and changing their mindset will also take some time. Brother Yu said. If they were to accumulate it themselves, of course it would take time. But that Hongchen Yixiao seems to have prepared for it. Han family young master said. Oh. Apple vinegar. He's a character who has accumulated thousands of PK points. Who in this game has more PK experience than him? Han family young master said. You mean that he found apple vinegar to be an instructor? Everyone was startled. Han family young master nodded. But since he already had such an arrangement, why did he find trouble with us? You have to think about it from his point of view. His idiotic way of thinking in pursuit of balance. Brother Yu, put yourself in his shoes, said young Master Han. Brother Yu's face darkened. He didn't reply, but his mind was already involuntarily putting himself in the shoes. There was nothing he could do. Brother Yu's gossipy soul was so fierce. If he didn't think things through, he wouldn't be able to sleep well. Everyone saw that Brother Yu seemed to have really entered Hongchen Yixiao's realm of thought, and didn't dare to make a sound to disturb him. Brother Yu came back to his senses after a while. Seeing that everyone was looking at him with anticipation, he was depressed, but he had to say, that guy kept saying that he wanted to harmonize with Qianli. Then from his point of view, Qianli's existence in the game is a threat to the game. Then his previous actions against us might have been to restrict Qianli. To put it more bluntly, it was to find something for Qianli to do, so that Qianli wouldn't do something that would destroy the balance in his mind. Then from his point of view, what he did wasn't very balanced, right? He gathered so many people and reached level 40 so quickly. Unscathed in battle said. It's fighting fire with fire. Yutian Xinming said. Gu Fei raised his hand and slapped the back of his head. Yutian Xinming was depressed. After all, these imbalances are in his own hands. After he gets rid of Qianli, he can just leave the game and the imbalances that he represents will disappear. Brother Yu said. Why does this sound so familiar? Unscathed in battle scratched his head. Terminator Episode 2. After killing others, he'll kill himself. Fire Blazing Clothes said. Damn, he's the Terminator. Everyone snorted disdainfully. Burning clothes, that's a pretty good analogy. Brother Yu praised. He then turned to the others and said, I think that's the general situation. I wonder how much he wants to torture Qianli to achieve balance. Everyone was curious. Let me ask. Gu Fei was also very curious about this question. You won't compromise, right? Everyone asked. Outsiders didn't know, but his friends knew. As long as it wasn't a matter of principle, Qianli was a person who was easy to negotiate with. If he really has a reason, then I'll be the one to be the Terminator. Gu Fei said. What do you mean? Everyone was confused. It means that he'll kill them all and then kill himself. Brother Yu said. Please don't. A group of people surrounded Gu Fei. We still need you to make a living. Jiannan and the others shouted the loudest. It wasn't easy for them to find a good boss, but it was over so quickly. How could they enjoy it? Let's ask him. Gu Fei sighed. But I'm 80% sure he won't reply. Gu Fei said as he sent a message to Yi Xiaowu. He wanted to ask him what he wanted, but he remembered that Yi Xiaowu had a habit of not replying to his messages. On second thought, Gu Fei sent him a message asking him to meet at a tavern in Baishe City. Regardless of whether Yi Xiaowu replied, Gu Fei decided to wait and see. I'll ask him to meet me, Gu Fei said to the others. Are you crazy? Everyone was shocked. Then why doesn't he take the opportunity to surround you? Brother, you said. Let's do it. Gu Fei didn't care. It's a bit difficult to kill them all, but I don't think it'll be difficult to escape. Let's go with you, the others said. No need. It's as if I'm afraid of him with so many people, Gu Fei said. Now isn't the time to be a hero. The others advised. What do you mean by being a hero? Gu Fei said, isn't it? Everyone was silent. After a while, Brother Yu said with difficulty, okay. In this game, you can count. Gu Fei nodded in satisfaction. Why don't I go with you? Bai Yan Jingluan suggested. No need. Gu Fei patted him. You poor people should hurry up and study the next step of the teaching plan. Damn. Bai Yan Jingluan was depressed. Jiannan and the others were also depressed. Let's disband now. Go do what you need to do. Gu Fei announced. Aren't we all going back to the city? The others despised him. Will they set up an ambush on the way back? Brother Yu began to worry again. No. If an ambush would work, we wouldn't have to retreat just now, Han family young master said. Asking them to meet is actually a good way to beat them at their own game, Brother Yu said. I'm just saying. Brother Yu saw Gu Fei looking at him from the corner of his eyes. Han family young master shook his head. This isn't something that can be solved by fighting and killing. Huh? Their goal is different. Those people aren't here to play the game. They've gathered to deal with Qinli. What's the use of suppressing them? Han family young master said. It looks like Qinli understands this too. That's why he chose to negotiate with them, Han family young master said. Brother Yu looked at Gu Fei but saw Gu Fei walking with his head lowered. He didn't know if he was listening to them or not. White Stone City. Yi Xiaowu and the others had already returned to the city. After those who died and revived in the city went to meet up with the rest, everyone fell into a deathly silence. Teach them a lesson. Sniper God said after a while, teach them a bloody lesson, comrades. What do you mean by arrogant soldiers are bound to lose? The enemy killed 5 of our warriors without suffering any damage. What do you all think? Silence. We're in a new battle environment. Everyone must get used to it as soon as possible. We can't let today's joke happen again. Sniper God said. Yes. Everyone's expression froze. They had retired from the army for many years, but their habits hadn't changed. The yes that expressed their obedience and determination was still as powerful as ever. Introduce us to the friend you introduced who has a lot of experience in the game. Sniper God turned his head and said to Yi Xiaowu. Alright, I'll do it, Yi Xiaowu said. Old Kai, Little Chen, Big Yong, Old Cow, Big Pow. You 5 hurry up and get back to level 40, Sniper God said. Yes. These 5 people were the 2 warriors, 1 fighter, 1 rogue, and 1 priest that had been killed in the previous battle. They nodded and immediately turned around to train. Old 5 and Rocket are lost. Who's going to help them? Sniper God asked. I'll go. Broken Arrow was the only one out of the group that had some skill in the game. Broken Arrow was about to get up when Yi Xiaowu received a message from Gu Fei. He paused. Qinli wants to meet me for a chat. That mage? Sniper God asked. Yes. Good guts, Sniper God praised. When? Broken Arrow asked. He said 8 at night, Yi Xiaowu said. Then let's go meet him. If he takes the initiative to back down, then that would be for the best, Broken Arrow said. Yi Xiaowu nodded. Sniper God was speechless. Then wouldn't we have come for nothing? Yes, Then you guys can be honorably discharged, Broken Arrow said. Fuck, you bastard, why didn't you talk earlier? Sniper God cursed. Japan also surrendered after being hit by 2 atomic bombs, Broken Water Arrow said. So we've been grinding day and night to level 40 just to be a nuclear deterrent? Sniper God said. Sun Tzu said, winning 100 battles is not the best of the best. Subduing the enemy without fighting is the best of the best. Broken Arrow said. I think you're looking for trouble, right? Sniper God said angrily. Old Broken Arrow is right. At this time, a more experienced person in the team expressed his support for Broken Arrow. Old Sniper, you still need to improve your skills. Yes, you're already so old, yet you call yourself Sniper God, aren't you a little too much? Ha 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 ha. Everyone laughed and cursed. Sniper God wasn't their superior back in the day, so there wasn't that kind of respect between a superior and a subordinate. When Sniper God spoke, everyone yelled, yes, because they felt that what he said was reasonable, so they responded out of habit. Now that they felt that Sniper God was being unreasonable, they immediately laughed and cursed him. Did you forget what Advisor Su said about you? An old soldier imitated the scene in his memory. He paced around and pretended to say, this young comrade Yang is really good at shooting, but why doesn't he like to study? He doesn't read and has no knowledge, so how is he going to improve his thinking? As a soldier, he can't be like this. Chapter 627. Gu Fei's class was scheduled to start at 4:00, 1 lesson per hour, a total of 4 hours. After they finished teaching, it was 8:00 in the morning. They encountered an ambush on the road. Although it was quite dangerous, the entire battle only lasted for 10 minutes. It was only 9:00 when everyone returned to Whitestone City. Seeing that Gu Fei didn't need their help to meet, these people were preparing to go offline at this time. In the end, they saw that Gu Fei was also going offline with them. Don't you have an appointment with someone? Yutian Shinming was puzzled. I didn't say to meet now. Gu Fei said. Then when? Yutian Shinming asked. At night. What if we don't get along and we fight? I have to go offline first to rest. Gu Fei said. Yutian Shinming felt a chill. He felt that Gu Fei didn't seem to have any sincerity in the negotiation. It seemed like he was looking for a fight. As expected, he was a PvP maniac. But things in the game didn't stop because Gu Fei and the others went offline. After the White Mill class ended, a new round of competition for the leveling area was set off. Brother Yu's previous speculation was unfortunately correct. There were many members sent by big guilds to learn among their students. After they memorized the knowledge, they quickly began to organize their own guild members to learn. This time, the guilds weren't limited to Whitestone City. Surrounding main cities and distant main cities didn't care if they organized their own guild members to come here to level. In any case, they had to learn the leveling method first. At this time in the morning, most of the organizations that arrived to learn were from the city's guilds. After noon, guilds from the surrounding main cities such as Moonlit City and Shady Forest City would arrive one after another. Later on, there might even be guilds from further cities coming over. This time, everyone wouldn't be as disorganized and undisciplined as before in the wilderness camp. The guilds were all gearing up for this leveling area. Some of the private players tactfully gave way and didn't fight with others. On the other hand, the guilds that knew each other had long since coordinated with each other and started to divide up the territory without saying anything. As for those that didn't know each other, they didn't rashly start a fight either. Instead, they sat down and negotiated. In the end, the leveling area became orderly. The guilds guarded their own territories, and the individual players could only swallow their anger and stay in their own territory. Everyone was depressed, but there was nothing they could do. They were no longer in the mood to steal kills from each other. If they huddled together like this, with more people and fewer monsters, the efficiency of leveling would be nothing more than empty talk. The guild might have a lot of members, but they were organized. It was true that there weren't enough monsters for an entire guild to grind, but they wouldn't send that many people at a time. They would first send 300 to 500 people to grind, then switch to another batch every hour. This way, everyone would be able to enjoy 2 or 3 times the leveling efficiency of an hour, which was much better than these individual players who could be seen but not touched. The balance between the various guilds was quite delicate. Everyone guarded their own territory, and no one crossed the line. After all, the guilds present were roughly equal in strength. Once a battle broke out, no one would be able to devour the other. In the end, both sides would suffer losses, and the third party would be the one to benefit. The various guild bosses clearly saw the stakes. In any case, it was enough to fight for a piece of land for their own guild. Moreover, everyone had a tacit understanding. No guild's territory was too big, and everyone's area had the same amount of monsters. Because of this, no one had any complaints. Everyone felt that this kind of balance was pretty good. As a result, a few of the big guilds privately discussed an offensive and defensive alliance. They decided that the guilds present would be in charge of the leveling area. As for those who came later, no one would allow it. If there was any trouble, they would attack together. This alliance was somewhat similar to Waterside City's beach market. The contract was signed at noon that day. At this time, there were a total of 12 guilds stationed in White Mill's leveling area. Most of them were the local guilds of Whitestone City, as well as the guilds of Moonlit City, Shady Forest City, and Stormwind City. Among them was Moonlit City's 10-guild alliance. Although the 10-guild alliance was made up of 10 guilds, the outside world treated them as a single guild. With more than 4,000 players, they were much stronger than ordinary rank 6 guilds. However, Cloud Twilight didn't have any intentions of monopolizing the leveling area. He wasn't stupid. With a glance, he knew that monopolizing the leveling area was something that would incur the wrath of the masses. Although the 10-guild alliance was strong, it wasn't easy to cover the sky with one hand in a main city. Now that they were in the outside world, Cloud Twilight was very clear that it wasn't realistic to try and intimidate the big guilds from various main cities. If he forced them into a corner, they would immediately create a temporary 10-guild alliance. With 10 rank 6 guilds and more than 10,000 players, what would Cloud Twilight's 10-guild alliance amount to? That was why when he saw that everyone was so united and friendly as they divided up the leveling area, Twilight in the Dusk Cloud was very happy to join them. These guilds had long heard that the people of Moonlit City were valiant and that PvP was second nature to them. This 10-guild alliance was currently the largest organization in the parallel world. When they first saw them, everyone thought that a storm was coming. They didn't expect that they would also comply with the temporary rules of dividing the leveling area. However, Cloud Twilight used the reason that his guild had a lot of members and hoped that he would be given a bit more leveling area according to the ratio of people. From an equal and friendly point of view, Cloud Twilight's request wasn't too excessive. In addition, the guild leaders weren't willing to go against the 10-guild alliance. As a result, Cloud Twilight got his wish and obtained an area that was 4 times larger than those ordinary rank 6 guilds. Since Cloud Twilight took so much, everyone immediately thought that he should take less. As a result, a few rank 5 guilds that weren't even rank 6 were given a smaller leveling area according to the ratio of people. Cloud Twilight saw that the 12 guilds had more or less divided the leveling area, but this didn't guarantee that no other guilds would arrive. Cloud Twilight and his guild were close neighbors. They set out in the morning and arrived at noon. If this was a main city further away, they might be on their way. Perhaps they would arrive at 2 or 3 in the afternoon. In order to prevent everyone's leveling area from being divided by newcomers, Cloud Twilight proposed an agreement for the 12 guilds to occupy the White Mill. After all, he was the boss of the 10-guild alliance. He was very experienced in forming alliances. This suggestion was exactly what everyone wanted. Originally, there were only the 3 big guilds of Whitestone City, so they were very happy with the division. However, at noon, guilds from the 3 neighboring main cities arrived one after another and divided the area. The original 3 areas were quickly divided into 12. Everyone felt quite pained. Everyone was aware of the problem that Cloud Twilight had thought of. When they thought about how the leveling area would be divided again and again and again, who would be willing? As a result, when Cloud Twilight's suggestion came out, everyone immediately applauded. With the 12 big guilds in an alliance, everyone had the momentum to challenge the world. As a result, they were determined not to back down when other guilds arrived. At this time, a few small guilds came again. Seeing this scene, they already classified themselves as small guilds and didn't dare to use their guild as an excuse to come forward. When it was almost 3 in the afternoon, as everyone had expected, guilds from the 2 main cities arrived. The first to arrive was Waterside City's Green Narrow Shadows Guild. The leveling area in front of them was clearly marked with flags. Guild leader Green Narrow Shadow only needed one look to know what was going on. However, he didn't realize that these guys had very friendly discussions and agreed on the division of territory. He treated this as a buffet. He thought that each guild would have their own territory to level. As a result, he casually led his people to the unflagged area. The unflagged area was the leveling area for small guilds. On the whole, it looked even bigger than Cloud Twilight's 10 guild alliances territory. This was intentionally left behind by the 12 guilds when they divided up the leveling area. They didn't want to be too ruthless. They had to give the majority of players who didn't have a guild or power a bite to eat. The number of people in this leveling area was completely disproportionate. Many people just relied on their luck to see if the monsters would coincidentally spawn next to them. They completely relied on the heavens to make a living, but they couldn't bear to leave. Painting Narrow Shadow didn't understand when he first arrived. He thought that this was a free market for individual players, and they could just take whatever they wanted. So, he led his people and squeezed into the leveling area, wanting to take a piece of the cake for himself. This was a big misunderstanding. Green Narrow Shadow saw that the 12 guilds were leveling happily and thought that this leveling area was for them to slaughter. How could he know that there were so many twists and turns? In reality, the leveling area for small guilds was very big at first. It was completely disproportionate to the territory occupied by the 3 local guilds. As a result, the small guilds didn't take it seriously at all. Afterwards, one guild after another came, moving a bit more and moving a bit more. It wasn't until Cloud Twilight and the others arrived and took over a territory that was 4 times the size of a normal guild did the small guilds realize that their area had become much smaller. This was like boiling a frog in warm water. They unknowingly and comfortably took over their area. In the end, those who wanted to say something could only swallow their anger because a bunch of small guilds didn't even have anyone to take the lead. Green Narrow Shadow immediately led his people and charged in. Everyone had been swallowing their anger for a long time. A barrel of gunpowder would explode at the slightest touch. On the spot, there were people who started cursing. Green Narrow Shadow still hadn't figured it out. He was furious. You didn't scold those dozen or so guilds, but you scolded me. Are you looking down on me? He immediately ordered his subordinates to surround and attack the players who were cursing the loudest. He wanted to kill one to warn the others. But the problem was, there were more than 100 players in the leveling area. Moreover, the leveling area was so big. No matter how fiercely he killed, many players wouldn't be able to see it. They could only hear the rumors. Fuck, another guild came. They're so arrogant, killing people the moment they arrived. Fuck, even when the 10 guild alliance came, they weren't like this. Who the fuck is so arrogant? Kill them. The place is already so crowded. If it gets taken over, we won't be able to play anymore. Kill, kill, kill. Where there was oppression, there would be resistance. In reality, oppression was always there, and resistance was always there. It was just that the oppression wasn't as strong, and the resistance wasn't as fierce. For example, when the 12 guilds occupied territory, they were also oppressing. However, they did it more gently, so everyone's resistance was just a few curses in their hearts. Now that painting Narrow Shadow was doing too well, and everyone was resisting fiercely, shouldn't they attack when the time came? The individual players exploded together, and painting Narrow Shadow panicked for a moment. However, he had no choice but to fight now. He hurriedly organized his guild members to face the enemy. In a group fight, there was a huge difference between those who were organized and those who weren't. Although the players had the advantage in numbers, they were facing an organized and coordinated resistance. They couldn't instantly drown the enemy in the sea of people's war. However, painting Narrow Shadow also understood that if this continued, his side would be wiped out. In the end, both sides would suffer heavy losses, so he ordered his people to break out of the encirclement and escape. Who would have thought that the 12 guilds would suddenly act upon hearing the news? They organized their own teams and surrounded painting Narrow Shadow more effectively, killing a circle of his people the moment they appeared. Painting Narrow Shadow panicked. We're all from the leveling area, so why are they suddenly attacking me? Did they make a mistake somewhere? Don't fight, we're on the same side. Painting Narrow Shadow shouted without any dignity. That's right, we're hitting you. This is what you get for looting the leveling area. This is what you get for looting the leveling area. Everyone cursed and fired even more fiercely. Fuck, aren't you guys looting? Painting Narrow Shadow roared, but his voice couldn't be heard. He had just jumped out of the crowd when he shouted, don't fight. Everyone could tell that he was the leader, and 40 to 50 homing arrows flew towards him. Where else could he run to? Green Narrow Guild faced the most devastating attack in its history. There were a total of 748 players who participated in this expedition, but only 35 escaped. The rest were completely annihilated. These 35 players had shamelessly pulled out their guild badges and hid them in their pockets at the critical moment. Otherwise, they would have been wiped out. Oh. The players' cheers echoed in the air above the White Mill, cheering for chasing away the invaders. After that, everyone returned to leveling. The 12 guilds and the individual players got along better. The individual players didn't realize that they had slightly expanded their leveling area after the battle. After that, a few more guilds arrived, but they weren't as impatient as Green Narrow Guild. Want to occupy the leveling area? The 12 guilds didn't need to say anything. The individual players' eyes were now filled with confidence. They all knew that if another guild came, the 12 guilds would join them to chase away the invaders. The individual players were helpless when the guilds occupied the leveling area because they were alone. Now that they had backing, who would be willing to do so? Naturally, they would frown coldly. As soon as a guild approached with intentions, everyone would fiercely stare together, forcing the other party to retreat. After going to the unlucky Green Narrow Guild, the White Mill was in harmony for the entire day. The 12 guilds were inspired and wanted to develop the wilderness camp, but they couldn't help but sigh at the so-called custom. After opening the wilderness camp for so many days, it had already formed a rough and disorderly style. In the end, the 12 guilds received the fierce stare. Conquer by force? After thinking about it, everyone didn't want to cause any more trouble. In the end, they obediently returned to the White Mill's side. At around 7 o'clock in the evening, Gu Fei came online. He opened his friends list and saw that everyone was there. Hongchen Yixiao was also there, so he sent a message over, "Are you going tonight? Tell me, don't let me wait in vain." "Go." Yi Xiaowu replied. "Be there or be square." Gu Fei was also very straightforward. He closed the message and headed over there. In the mercenary channel, a bunch of people greeted him, asking where to meet and whether they needed support. "No need." Gu Fei very calmly refused. "What do you want to do?" Everyone was very curious. "I just want to hear what he wants to do," Gu Fei said. "A debate about balance and harmony?" Everyone guessed. Gu Fei didn't answer. When he arrived at the restaurant, it was 7:40, but Yi Xiaowu was already waiting there. He didn't come alone, water-breaking arrow was also by his side. Long time no see. Gu Fei first greeted. Yi Xiaowu nodded. What have you been busy with recently? Gu Fei asked. Yi Xiaowu was speechless. Ahem. Gu Fei sat down and asked for a glass of wine. His opening remarks were, aren't gamers not allowed to play games? Why have you been playing so wildly recently? Gu Fei already knew that Yi Xiaowu was a gamer, but Yi Xiaowu told him at the beginning that he entered the game to understand the situation. Moreover, he saw that Yi Xiaowu was online very little, even less than him. But recently, he was very abnormal. He played more during the winter vacation, but this guy was like a professional gamer, madly staying in the game for a long time. I quit. Yi Xiaowu said. Quit? Why? Gu Fei asked. Huh? Let's talk business today. Yi Xiaowu said. It's nothing big. Gu Fei said, I just want to know, what do you want after all this trouble? Didn't I already tell you? Your existence is a threat to the game. You will destroy the game's balance, so I have to stop you. Yi Xiaowu said. Stop. Gu Fei let out a long breath, how do I stop it? You can't kill me, this is just a game, I can always stand in this world. So I can only do my best to reduce your influence to the minimum. Yi Xiaowu said. What influence do I have? Gu Fei laughed. The game's progress has been destroyed by you many times, the werewolves in Luminous Village, Giordano in Fog City, and so on. After these processes have been activated, they have destroyed the overall rhythm of the game. Your powerful PK skills, and the efficient leveling method that you recently came up with, have caused a considerable amount of chaos among the players. I know you're a newbie, and perhaps you don't know how much influence this efficient leveling method has. Ask your friends, they might know better. Yi Xiaowu said. At first, I thought it was because of your Dark Knight streamer and Dark Knight spirit robe that magnified your advantage. If you can eliminate these two equipment, your influence will be limited. But this efficient leveling method has finally made me understand that for you, equipment is not the foundation. Your foundation is still your martial arts. Yi Xiaowu said. What's wrong with martial arts? Can't I play games if I have martial arts? Gu Fei asked. You can play, but I hope you don't use martial arts to do too many things. Yi Xiaowu said. Gu Fei suddenly stood up and flipped over the table with a kick. Yi Xiaowu didn't expect his mood to change so drastically, and was stunned on the spot. Water-breaking arrow thought that Gu Fei was going to go berserk, and hurriedly stepped in front of him. Swindlers can cheat in the game, robbers can steal equipment in the game, rich people spend money, poor people earn money, and there are even interest groups that make a living here. But martial arts can't. Practicing martial arts for 20 years. Forget it, you won't understand even if I tell you. In short, if martial arts can't be used in the game, please tell us this when the game is advertised. What do you think I play the game for? Is the game fun if I can't use martial arts? You insist. Nothing can make me give up martial arts, not to mention for the game. You're too ridiculous. Chapter 628. Okay, since you insist. Yi Xiaowu was silent. The tavern door opened and people rushed in. Gu Fei glanced at them and recognized them as the veterans who had ambushed them in the morning. Gu Fei smiled and took a deep breath to calm his excitement. He slowly took out the Dark Knight lightsaber from his pocket. The players in the tavern had already looked over in surprise when Gu Fei flipped the table. Now that so many people had suddenly rushed in, they naturally knew what was going to happen. In a closed space like the tavern, watching a show wasn't a good entertainment activity. The spells of the magicians, the arrows of the archers, and even the warrior's whirlwind slash had a high chance of accidentally injuring others. Therefore, most of the players immediately left when they realized that something was wrong. A few people who would die if they didn't join in the fun hid in the corner and tried to give these people as much space as possible. Negotiation failed. Negotiation failed. Prepare to attack. Prepare to attack. This group of veterans had also established a mercenary group. At this time, they were using the mercenary channel as a radio communication. Water-breaking arrow sent a message. When the people outside received the message, they immediately broke through the door. Some carried bows, some held swords, and some held staffs. After entering, they surrounded Gu Fei in a fan shape. They formed a fan-shaped encirclement to protect the players who were hiding in the corner. At the same time, they left a safe and smooth path for the players who wanted to escape. The three of them organized the evacuation of the players. These guys were treating this as a terrorist incident and were evacuating the masses. Gu Fei didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Is there any use in taking hostages? The crowd ignored him. Gu Fei suddenly attacked and stabbed at Yi Xiaowu, who was closest to him. Yi Xiaowu's skills weren't enough to dodge Gu Fei's sword. However, water-breaking arrow was always on guard. As soon as he saw Gu Fei raise his hand, he immediately lifted Yi Xiaowu and the two of them fell to the ground. If this was a normal day, such a crude dodging method would be waiting for Gu Fei to catch up and trample him to death. But the situation was different now. The veterans had basically completed the encirclement. As soon as they saw Gu Fei attack, someone immediately shouted, "Open fire." Regardless of their class, these guys always had a bow or crossbow with them. At this moment, they immediately raised their bows and released their arrows. Gu Fei was already on guard. When he saw those guys raise their hands, he flew over a table and used the table as a shield. Then, he heard continuous dang 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 sounds, and the wooden table was shot into a hedgehog. Gu Fei stole a glance outside. The tavern had two entrances that had been professionally sealed. As for the back door, this was just a system shop in the game. Everything that was sold was automatically generated. Of course, there wouldn't be anything like a delivery channel, so there was no back door. These two entrances were the exits, and there was no third option. The veterans continued to maintain their firepower to suppress Gu Fei while transferring a few fellows who were good at close combat to the table where Gu Fei was hiding. When they got close, the two warriors made a hand signal and the firepower stopped. The two of them drew their swords and bowed. They looked at each other and nodded. Suddenly, they charged towards the wooden table together. Of course, the wooden table couldn't withstand the charge of the two warriors and was sent flying. The two of them were also stunned. They clearly saw Gu Fei hiding behind the table, but there was no trace of Gu Fei. Before they could react, they suddenly felt a wave of heat beside them. Behind them, their companions shouted, "To the left." The two of them hurriedly turned to the left. Gu Fei had already flashed over with his dual flames, and a 720-degree double kill. Although the veterans were more skilled than the average player, seeing how they were being bullied by Jian Nan and unscathed in battle, they knew that their equipment was very ordinary. Most warriors would put some points into constitution, but they were more willing to put them into agility. In comparison, their HP was slightly lower than that of an average level 40 warrior. When faced with Gu Fei's surging ultimate skill, they died cleanly. After taking care of the two, Gu Fei didn't give the others a chance to attack him. He immediately darted to the pile of tables at the side. The legs of the tables were everywhere. If one didn't pay attention, they wouldn't notice that there was a person hiding among them. However, this time, Gu Fei did it in front of everyone. Naturally, everyone saw his position clearly. Before they could open fire, Gu Fei pushed and kicked over a few tables in an instant. He was crouched behind the tables, and no one could see his exact location. It's teleportation. Yi Xiaowu finally realized. After Gu Fei flipped over the tables, everyone thought that he was hiding behind the tables. Who knew that he would use teleportation to flash behind a nearby table? Everyone's attention was on the table at that time, and no one noticed. When the two warriors leaned over to flip over the table, they were instantly killed by Gu Fei, who was crouching at the side. Sigh. Experience. Yi Xiaowu sighed. This was another misunderstanding caused by his lack of experience. Based on common sense, Gu Fei was definitely behind the table. However, in the game, something as surreal as teleportation happened. Once again, the veterans were framed by the game's setting. The two comrades were sacrificed in a rather unjust manner. Even Yi Xiaowu didn't figure out this situation when Gu Fei flashed behind the table. Experience was the accumulation of experience. Naturally, there would always be places that one didn't think of when they judged a scene they had never experienced. A person's imagination was limitless. For example, Yi Xiaowu didn't expect Gu Fei to use teleportation to fly into the air to slash someone in the morning. During the day, apple cider vinegar really did fulfill Yi Xiaowu's request and told the veterans a lot about his PK experience in the game. However, the experience he talked about was basically the style of fighting between ordinary players. Compared to fighting with Gu Fei, there was a huge difference in Qianli. Rather than fighting with Gu Fei, the veterans might as well rely on their actual combat experience. As for being fooled by teleportation, they could only learn from their mistakes and slowly grow in actual combat. Drop the bomb. Water-breaking arrow turned and shouted at Old Lei and Dalei. The veterans' ideas were so deeply rooted that it was difficult for them to completely abandon their understanding to adapt to the game. Instead, it was better to rely on some of the concepts in the game that they were familiar with. For example, when an arrow was shot, it was called firing. When a mage bombed the map, it was called dropping the bomb. Old Lei and Dalei stepped forward and threw their staffs. Two fire wheels fell from the sky and exploded toward the place where Gu Fei was hiding. Use a landmine. Water-breaking arrow suggested again. They called the 1,000 layers flames of the cinder tree a landmine. Yi Xiaowu felt that the lurker's trap was more like a landmine, but the veterans unanimously thought that the trap was a serious trap and was completely different from a landmine. The 1,000 layers flames of the flaming tree could barely be called a landmine. Hearing this, the two immediately cast the 1,000 layers flames together. The tables and chairs in the area that looked like a garbage dump turned into billowing waves of fire. Water-breaking arrow said unhappily, "Can't you two use a bomb and a landmine together?" The two nodded and said, "Wait, ammunition is being replenished." This meant that their skills were on cooldown. "Should we go closer?" the others asked. The veterans with rich combat experience had experienced real combat again and again in the game. When they found that their knowledge couldn't be used correctly in the game, they gradually began to hesitate. At this time, seeing that the enemy was lying in ambush, even though they were a large group, they couldn't decide whether to go closer or not. Everyone had seen Gu Fei's attack just now. One roll could roll up two groups of people. Now that everyone was in a group, they couldn't make up their minds whether to go closer or not. Yi Xiaowu thought back to Gu Fei's strike just now and felt astonished. At first, he thought that Gu Fei used double flame flash twice in a row, but after thinking about it, he found that the roll of flames didn't show any signs of interruption. One double flame flash spun around twice and didn't disappear. How was that possible? Yi Xiaowu didn't understand the technical content of Gu Fei's spin. Naturally, he couldn't understand it even if he cracked his head. Expand the encirclement, flank him from both sides. The veterans had already discussed a new battle plan. The encirclement didn't shrink but instead expanded. After expanding the radius, two groups of people had already flanked Gu Fei's hiding place. However, when they looked over, they immediately collapsed. "He's gone again." While they were moving, Gu Fei's teleportation cooldown was over and he once again flashed to who knows where. The distance of teleportation is about 5 meters. Yi Xiaowu hurriedly told everyone. Everyone's expression turned cold. They immediately expanded the radius of the area by 5 meters and searched with their eyes. In the end, they still couldn't find any traces of Gu Fei. He teleported on foot. Water-breaking Arrow sighed, but in the end, he's still in this tavern. Unfortunately, the tavern was extraordinarily large. There were tables everywhere, and all of them were possible hiding spots. The veterans looked around with bright eyes, and the legs of tables and benches were everywhere. In just a short while, their eyes were dazzled. These people weren't young. In some aspects, they really couldn't be compared with young people. The tables and chairs are placed too densely. It doesn't meet the fire safety requirements at all. A veteran complained. I heard that you went to the local area to do firefighting after you retired. Someone next to him asked. Yes. How was it? Did you make any contributions? I've done it once, 3rd class. The man chuckled. Good. You didn't embarrass us. Another person patted his shoulder and said. They were chatting, but there was still no trace of Gu Fei. Remove the obstacles. Water-breaking Arrow said and asked Yi Xiaowu next to him, can I? In the system's shop, there were tables and chairs arranged by the system. Water-breaking Arrow didn't know if the system would have any opinions if he casually fiddled with it. But seeing that Gu Fei had already flipped over so many tables, the system didn't seem to have any reaction. If it's damaged, the system will ask for compensation. Yi Xiaowu said. Do you have enough money? Water-breaking Arrow asked. Yi Xiaowu also felt guilty. This tavern was huge. He knew how much the system would ask for money. If it really asked for compensation, did he have enough money to pay? Whatever. Let's mess around first. Yi Xiaowu said. What would happen if he didn't have enough money? Ordinary people might not know, but Yi Xiaowu knew the rules. In fact, nothing would happen. The system wanted money, but you didn't give it. Then the system would directly take the money from your pocket. If it wasn't enough, it would take the money until it was enough. What could you do to the system? Water-breaking Arrow nodded to the crowd. These guys continued to search for Gu Fei's location while moving the tables and chairs from the searched areas to the side. With more and more empty areas, it wouldn't be easy for Gu Fei to continue playing hide-and-seek. Who are these guys? The players gathered in the corner whispered and discussed with each other. I've never seen them before. I don't know any of them. There were also people in the audience who claimed to be famous in the city, but he didn't know any of the players in front of him. Just now when I asked the mages to throw spells, I think I heard them shout something about throwing bombs. Someone said. That's interesting. Who is the person they're chasing? One double flame flash killed 2 warriors. Who do you think it is? Qianli drunk? Who else could it be besides him? That's my idol. Where is he hiding now? Did you guys see him? No. After teleporting just now, I don't know where he flashed to. These players discussed while looking for Gu Fei's figure in the pile of tables and chairs. The veterans continued to search carefully, moving the tables and chairs. The entire tavern was gradually cleared out by them. Some of the players who entered the tavern were shocked. They didn't know what was going on. Not having a place to drink wasn't a big deal. At the very least, it couldn't be compared to not having a place to level up. So, no one felt anything. Instead, they curiously stayed behind to see what these people were doing. As a result, more and more players stood at the edge of the tavern. The veterans' investigation was finally coming to an end. In such a small area, there was no need to move anything. It was obvious that there was no one there. Everyone was in a trance. During the investigation, they were always on guard against Gu Fei's sudden attack, so it was impossible for Gu Fei to move anywhere during the investigation. And considering that Gu Fei could teleport 5 or 6 meters at a time, they had cleared out a 5-meter-wide empty space at the beginning of the investigation. Then, Gu Fei would teleport to this empty space and be completely exposed, or continue to teleport to an unsearched area. Gu Fei hadn't been exposed. At this time, all the areas had been searched, but there was no sign of him. Where did he go? Did we blow him up just now? Old Thunder and Big Thunder said. Did anyone see the white light? Breaking Arrow asked the others. He didn't see it. No. Everyone shook their heads. At that time, there was a fire. If the white light appeared, it would have been covered, someone said. It's just 4 spells. Even if he was hit by all of them, he shouldn't have died, right? Breaking Arrow asked Yi Xiaowu. When it came to data calculations, Yi Xiaowu was much more experienced than them. He won't die, Yi Xiaowu asserted. Yi Xiaowu asserted. He was well aware of Old Thunder's magic damage, and he had been paying attention to Gu Fei for a long time. He was also well aware of Gu Fei's equipment and stats. Old Thunder's 4 spells were definitely not enough to kill Gu Fei. Actually, do you two have PK points? Yi Xiaowu asked a simpler question. The two immediately understood and shook their heads. No. He didn't die. Did he use the Windchaser emblem? Breaking Arrow said. Apple Vinegar is over there. I didn't see him. Yi Xiaowu was prepared for this. What the hell? Breaking Arrow was surprised. At this time, Sniper God came over and whispered something to the two. The two froze. The other veterans searched the tavern and couldn't find Gu Fei. Just as they were feeling helpless, Breaking Arrow suddenly sent a message in the channel, everyone, be careful. The target is probably in the crowd. Everyone froze. They didn't disturb the normal players. Everyone was free to come and go in the tavern. However, when they saw them working, no one was stupid enough to occupy a spot to drink. They either left or stood at the base of the wall to watch the show. At this time, the base of the wall was filled with people, and this spot was indeed something they hadn't noticed. If Gu Fei hid behind the table for the second time and used instant movement to blend into the crowd, it would still be feasible. Everyone was sure of this deduction, but they didn't show it on their faces. Instead, they were certain that Gu Fei had left. The few people who were guarding the entrance had already left, looking like they were about to retreat. It's fake. At this time, a player beside Gu Fei whispered to him, pretend to leave and wait for you to appear before coming back. You can even see through this. You're not simple. Gu Fei was indeed in the crowd, and as soon as he appeared, he was discovered by the people around him. However, the main quality of the bystanders was that they would watch a good show and not mind things getting out of hand. Moreover, Gu Fei was alone at this time, and these people were a group. No one understood the grudges between them, so they would definitely lean towards Gu Fei's side, who seemed to be the weaker one. As a result, when Gu Fei hid among them, the people who knew about it all laughed in secret. No one said anything. Especially the person who was talking to Gu Fei. He immediately started a conversation with Gu Fei and the two chatted happily. Hearing Gu Fei's praise, this person curled his lips in disdain and said, there are only 2 exits. You didn't leave and you didn't die. I don't even need to think to know that you're still here. Look at how ignorant you are. Who said that not leaving and not dying means that I'm still here? Gu Fei said. What else could it be? The person asked. Look at this. Gu Fei showed him the Windchaser emblem. I have a completed bounty quest on me. If I want to leave, I can teleport away. How did you get this? The person's eyes widened. 100 bounty quests. How long would that take? After listening to Gu Fei's explanation, the person's eyes widened even more. In the eyes of most people, bounty quests were laborious and unrewarding. If they didn't need to clear PK, who would be willing to do that? This guy had played the game for so long, but he still hadn't had the honor of having PK points. Alright, I can't talk to you anymore. They're all leaving. Gu Fei began to squeeze out of the crowd. What are you doing? The person was shocked. Accumulating PK points. Gu Fei said as he walked out. Suddenly, a white light rose up in the tavern. Everyone was surprised. The most common situation with white light was when a person disappeared. White light rose up in a place where no one was. This could only be seen when offline players came online. After all, things like teleport scrolls weren't common, so it wasn't common to see people teleport everywhere. Yi Xiaowu and the others were really just pretending to leave. Apart from the thieves who were quietly lying in ambush, the others were also paying attention to the situation in the tavern when they left. At this moment, when the white light rose up, several people who hadn't left immediately stopped and looked back. Chapter 629. The seasoned soldiers were really quick-witted. When they saw the abnormal white light rising, they immediately formed a fan-shaped encirclement, regardless of who it was. Several people who had already retreated out of the door were summoned and rushed in again. No one knew who the white light was, but they couldn't deny that it was not Gu Fei. Did he get disconnected in an accident? Yi Xiaowu muttered. The quality of the parallel world servers was excellent, and the network in this era was also excellent, but it couldn't withstand natural and man-made disasters. For example, a sudden power outage, or the network cable was cut by some goddamn person. It would be strange if he didn't get disconnected in such a situation. The white light quickly faded, and a player appeared inside. Yi Xiaowu and the others almost thought that it was Thousand Miles drunk. However, when they saw that the player's attire was completely different, they hesitated and didn't open fire on the spot. After taking a closer look, they saw clearly that this person looked a bit like Qianli, but he was definitely not Qianli. After this person appeared, a group of people pointed their crossbows at him. After looking around, they felt that this place was very unfamiliar, and a look of surprise appeared on their faces. Yi Xiaowu and the others muttered in their hearts. This person was undoubtedly not the drunkard from 1,000 Li, but the problem was that he really looked like the drunkard from 1,000 Li. Wasn't his appearance a little too coincidental? When they didn't know what to do, a person squeezed out from the corner of the wall and greeted the guy who appeared in the tavern by stepping on the white light. "Why are you here?" The person turned his head when he heard the voice and saw Gu Fei. He was also quite surprised and then asked, "Where is this?" This question confused Gu Fei. He looked at him and said, "Are you still in a daze from sleep?" This person's expression was indeed very sleepy, and he looked around blankly again. Yi Xiaowu and the others didn't have the leisure to watch Gu Fei chat with others. As soon as they saw Gu Fei appear, they opened fire again without mercy. Since Gu Fei dared to come out, he was certainly on guard. He jumped and flipped behind a table. Now, the tables were piled up together while water-breaking Arrow and the others were investigating, making it even more crowded. Once Gu Fei dodged, he didn't even need to flip over the tables, and he immediately disappeared. The veterans cried. They thought of a saying, "The evils we bring upon ourselves are the hardest to bear." While the veterans were preparing to attack Gu Fei, they saw that the guy who had just come out was acquainted with Gu Fei. They were worried that he would lend a hand, so the crossbows in their hands were pointed at him. The man was very dissatisfied. He looked at the people pointing at him and said, "Why are you pointing at me? He's there." Old Lei and Dalei threw another round of bombs over there. In the fire, Gu Fei popped his head out and scolded that guy, "Gu Xian, you are too mean. Even if you don't want to help me, don't frame me." Gu Xian did not think much of it. He calmly walked toward the foot of the wall amidst the hail of bullets from the veterans. The veterans found that he was not going to help Gu Fei, so naturally, he was not their enemy. Seeing him so rashly shuttling through the lines of attack, they began to worry about him. One of them found that an arrow was flying toward him when Gu Xian took a step forward. He shouted, "Be careful." But then he saw Gu Xian casually raise his hand and pull the arrow to one side. Everyone looked at the freak who suddenly appeared in astonishment. Gu Fei saw this scene in the pile of tables and sighed with emotion. Logically speaking, Gu Xian, a guy who never practiced martial arts, shouldn't have such a fast reaction. But there was no other way. This guy was born with a fast reaction. Otherwise, how could he be called a genius? But it seemed that his reaction level had improved. Thinking of this, Gu Fei popped his head out again and shouted, "You have a fast reaction. Are you playing a game?" The veterans fainted. As expected, Gu Fei moved among the tables again. This time, his head popped up in a different position than before. Poor old Thunder and Big Thunder were still foolishly shooting at the previous position. Gu Xian ignored Gu Fei. He walked to the foot of the wall and found a player who was watching the scene. He asked, "Where is this?" "White Foam Tavern," the player answered and looked at Gu Xian strangely. "I mean which main city?" Gu Xian said. "Baishir City." "Fuck." Gu Xian cursed angrily. Only then did he have the time to look back at Yi Xiaowu and the others. These guys had once again expanded their range to surround Gu Fei. But this time, in order to prevent him from sneaking into the crowd again, they asked for the cooperation of the players in the nearby corner. Gu Xian looked at the players around him and asked, "Who are these people?" "I don't know." Gu Xian couldn't get an answer, so he simply shouted at the top of his voice, "Gu Fei, what did you do this time? Can't you be quiet?" Before Gu Fei could answer, Yi Xiaowu's heart had already skipped a beat. This guy called Qianli drunk, but it wasn't his in-game ID. Gu Fei. Was this Qianli drunk's real name? If that was the case, then they knew each other in real life. It was impossible for him not to help. Nowadays, the times were changing with each passing day. The internet was becoming more and more accepted by people. Friends made on the internet might not be as close as those made in real life. But friends in real life were, after all, frequently seen. For example, if this person was your colleague, even if you didn't have a good relationship with him, it would be very awkward when they met at work the next day even if he asked you for a favor in the game. It was not conducive to unity. If this person was your boss, you would hate him but still have to help him. Friendship on the internet might be more based on pure feelings, but relationships in real life were often mixed with interests, and the two couldn't be compared in parallel. So when Yi Xiaowu realized that Gu Xian and Gu Fei knew each other in real life, he immediately dared not let his guard down. Just now, this person had actually sent an arrow flying with a slap. Was this something an ordinary person could do? Could it be? Yi Xiaowu looked at Gu Xian. Although Gu Fei was nowhere to be seen, his voice flew out from the pile of tables. It was as if Yi Xiaowu was implying something to Gu Xian. This person is called Red Dust Smile. He's a game worker. He said that I was affecting the balance of the game, so he came to help me. Hongchen Xiao. Who is it? Gu Fei just spoke and didn't point. Gu Xian still didn't know which one was Hongchen Xiao. He only found that someone had been staring at him. He couldn't help but look at Yi Xiaowu. It's you. Yi Xiaowu nodded. Game worker, right? Gu Xian walked over and said, "Let me give you some advice about this game." Yi Xiaowu was originally cautious and didn't want to get close to Gu Xian. Who knew that Gu Xian would say such a thing? Gu Xian was startled and continued, "I'll accept the penalty of money, level, skill mastery, and equipment for forcefully going offline, but you can't teleport me randomly. I forcefully went offline in Xiaoyu City, but now I'm actually online." What city is this? Gu Xian turned back and asked the player. Baishir City, the person answered in a daze. Baishir City. Why did I come to Baishir City when I was online? Forcefully going offline is like this. You didn't say anything. I've never encountered this before. What's going on? How many main cities are here in Xiaoyu City? In the game, the distance between two cities was basically balanced. So when players said that the distance between two cities, the unit was city. One city meant that there were two main cities next to each other, and two cities naturally meant that there was a city in the middle. 3 cities. Yi Xiaowu answered. 3 cities. Fuck. Gu Xian had already reached Yi Xiaowu's side. Once he heard the answer, he went berserk and reached out to grab Yi Xiaowu's neck. You casually teleported me outside of the 3 cities. Do you have any sense of responsibility? I forcefully went offline every day because I didn't want to go that way. Now you're telling me to go back to Xiaoyu City through the 3 cities. Do you want to die? Gu Xian roared. This guy's ID, Wind String, was also one of the top 10 grandmasters of combat. He was also one of the top experts in the game. A weak cleric like Yi Xiaowu was like a chicken in his hands. Yi Xiaowu's face turned green. When this guy first said that he was giving his opinion, he was still quite serious. He didn't expect that he would say something like this. Moreover, he turned on him so quickly. He was still amiable at first, but suddenly, his health was dropping. Yi Xiaowu realized that after this guy's forceful grip on his neck, it caused minor damage. His health was slowly dropping. What was worse was that this feeling of suffocation was very uncomfortable. Water-breaking Arrow and the others were not far from Yi Xiaowu, but they didn't expect this guy to suddenly go berserk and take Yi Xiaowu down. This group of veterans had a deep-rooted idea again. No one fired at Gu Xian immediately. Instead, they reached out and signaled for Gu Xian to calm down. They said, "Don't do anything stupid." The formation that was originally surrounding Gu Fei quickly changed, and Gu Xian was now in the center of the circle. Gu Fei, who was among the tables, stood up in a daze. He looked at the situation and said, "Is holding a hostage really useful?" This reminded Water-breaking Arrow and the others. Yes, this was a game. People could be resurrected after they died. What was the use of holding a hostage? Everyone thought about it and prepared to forcefully rescue the hostage. Gu Xian had already seen through this group of people's plans. He quickly reached out and stopped them. Wait, I haven't finished. Everyone subconsciously stopped. Gu Xian continued to ask Yi Xiaowu, "If I let you go, can you send me back to the place where I went offline last time?" Of course, this kind of thing was impossible. Moreover, Yi Xiaowu had now resigned. However, it was the first time that Yi Xiaowu encountered a situation where there was a mistake in saving the offline location when he went offline by force. It was indeed infuriating to be suddenly transported outside the 3 cities. Yi Xiaowu could understand it, but the problem was that he heard from this guy's words that he frequently used to go offline by force. His equipment, money, level, and skills must have been confiscated. He didn't care about these things. Why was he so angry this time after being transported? Compared to that, being transported was not a loss at all. Yi Xiaowu was surprised, but he felt his throat loosen. It was Gu Xian who slightly relaxed the strength in his hand, allowing him to speak. Yi Xiaowu immediately shook his head. This is impossible. Not to mention that Yi Xiaowu had now resigned. Even if he had the authority, it was impossible for him to do this. Any consequences caused by forcefully going offline were borne by the players themselves. This was what the game company had always emphasized. It was impossible to open a back door for anyone. Broken Arrow and the others looked at Gu Xian. They had already received a negative answer, so they wanted to hear what he had to say. In the end, Gu Xian didn't say anything. He grabbed Yi Xiaowu's neck again and casually threw him. Yi Xiaowu was thrown away like a piece of trash, falling into the corner of the messy pile of tables and chairs. Everyone's gazes were fixed on him, wanting to see what kind of sorry state he would be in. They didn't think that the moment he fell, a white light would rise and Yi Xiaowu would actually be directly killed. Normal players were shocked at the damage of this body-hugging throw. They didn't think that this random guy was actually a ruthless person. This guy was indeed ruthless, but normal players' thinking was wrong. He was ruthless. The moment he threw Yi Xiaowu out, he even punched and kicked him. Normal players didn't notice, but how could experts with sharp eyes like Gu Fei and the others not see it? TSK TSK TSK. Gu Fei shook his head and flipped out from the pile of tables. He looked at Gu Xian with disdain and said, "It's not good to vent your anger on others." Gu Xian's gaze was unexpectedly helpless. He let out a long sigh and said, "The distance between the three cities, my heart is already dead, you're lazy until you die." Gu Fei didn't pay any more attention to him. Instead, he looked at Broken Arrow and the others. "What, do we continue?" Speaking of which, Gu Fei didn't have any ill feelings towards this group of veterans. He could see that they were a group of straightforward men. Heng Chen Yixiao was Broken Arrow's friend. People like them would naturally do anything for a friend. They emphasized the word loyalty, which had been passed down as a virtue since ancient times, but was often ridiculed in today's world. People couldn't do this word, so they criticized it more. They talked about the harm of feudal concepts and so on. All of them stood at the highest point of right and wrong, elaborating on the destructiveness of this word. But even the law was nothing more than human feelings. If one only emphasized the righteousness of the rules and didn't care about human feelings, then they wouldn't be human, but a parallel world system. Gu Fei looked at this group of veterans and knew that they wouldn't give up so easily. The sacrifice of a comrade was the most painful thing for these people. But at this time in the game, when they thought that their fallen comrade could immediately be resurrected at the resurrection point, this group of veterans actually experienced a great sense of happiness. It was just that every time this happened, everyone would always think of their comrades who sacrificed their lives on the real cruel battlefield. For a moment, their expressions would also be a little gloomy. But soon, everyone adjusted their mentality. As soon as Gu Fei finished his question, they immediately raised their bows, raised their crossbows, and threw their bombs. They all launched an attack together. Mountain Axe, who thought that he was more skilled in close combat, saw that Gu Xian was obviously also a martial artist. He immediately gave up on shooting from a long distance and pounced forward bravely. Gu Xian and Gu Fei both came from the Gu family, so their martial arts were naturally of the same origin. But in the game, there was a significant difference between the two. Gu Xian had strength, while Gu Fei didn't. As a result, there was a stark difference between the two of them. Mountain Axe also chose to be a grandmaster of combat, so he didn't have any suppression on Gu Xian in terms of strength. The two of them exchanged punches and kicks, which was quite similar to the battle between Bai Yan Jingjing and Mountain Axe in the morning. But although Gu Xian knew martial arts, he actually didn't practice martial arts. He didn't have the deep-rooted concerns that Gu Fei and the others had developed in the process of learning martial arts. Just by looking at how he locked Yi Xiaowu's throat just now, it could be seen that this guy was very violent when he used martial arts. This was something that Mountain Axe could feel more directly. The martial artist in front of him was very different from Gu Fei and Bai Yan Jingjing. This guy stabbed people's eyes, dug out their hearts, and kicked their genitals. He really used all kinds of vicious methods. If this was brought to reality, it would basically be a death sentence. Although Mountain Axe lost to Gu Fei in the morning, he actually only fought with Gu Fei for a few rounds, so he didn't know much about Gu Fei. On the contrary, the fierce battle with Bai Yan Jingjing gave him a better understanding of Bai Yan Jingjing. It was in the process of fighting with Bai Yan Jingjing that he realized that most of the martial artists' moves avoided the strong points and focused on the weak points. They were very skillful, but their damage was relatively low. Even after Gu Fei refuted his ideas and defeated him, he still had doubts about Kung Fu because holding grapes was not a serious matter, and Gu Fei's final move to kill him relied on the sudden change of skills in the game. This doubt was finally dispelled in the process of fighting with Gu Xian. Gu Xian knew all the moves of the Gu family, but he didn't practice them in real life, nor did he fight with them. Naturally, no one admonished him, and he naturally didn't have the same thoughts as Gu Fei or Bai Yan Jingjing. He really used whatever moves he needed to use. He didn't go easy on his opponent, nor was he polite. Everything he did was to kill his opponent. During the first 5 rounds, the two of them attacked and defended. After the 10th round, Mountain Axe was already at a disadvantage. After the 15th round, Mountain Axe felt a chill in his heart. Like Gu Fei, he often thought about what would happen if this was reality when he fought with others. It was fine to think about it normally, but he still thought about it when fighting with Gu Xian. The more he thought about it, the more he felt a chill in his heart. If he didn't die after fighting with this person, he would definitely be skinned, have his bones broken, be blinded, lose his ears, and have his penis broken. This was even more terrible than death. The overwhelming momentum he had when fighting with Bai Yan Jingjing gradually disappeared because of the chill in his heart. Mountain Axe finally witnessed with his own eyes how terrifying Kung Fu could be in actual combat. He completely believed what Gu Fei had said before, what you guys have mastered is only a shortcut. If you really want to spend your energy on this, you guys don't have the time. After the 20th round, Mountain Axe was finally taken out by Gu Xian. He swung his arm and threw it again. This time, he didn't fall to his death. Instead, he used it as a hidden weapon and threw it at Old Lei Dalei, who threw the bomb. Old Lei Dalei paused the bombardment of spells to dodge. Gu Xian looked at the sea of fire that was blasted out by the two of them in disdain. You're so useless. You dare to come out and directly fight with others? You've completely lost the face of the Gu family. Fuck, so you only want to deal with one. Gu Fei's voice came from the other side. The seasoned soldiers went crazy again. You've been watching so closely. Why did it move again? Teleportation was too shameless. What kind of game was this? It didn't make sense at all. Gu Xian and the other seasoned soldiers could also see that he was not inferior to Gu Fei. However, their main mission was to deal with Gu Fei after all. They didn't want to cause trouble for unrelated people, so the focus of their attacks wasn't on Gu Xian. Mountain Axe took the initiative to attack, and the others didn't help much. Now that Mountain Axe had lost, and Gu Fei was weaving in and out of the pile of tables, it was too difficult to deal with. Take them down one by one. Sniper God sent a message in the channel. Everyone nodded and accepted the order. They no longer insisted on fighting with Gu Fei. Everyone turned their arrows to Gu Xian, who was standing in front of them. In the end, Gu Xian leaped into the pile of tables on the side in an extremely smooth manner. Useless. On the other side, Gu Fei saw that Gu Xian was doing the same thing as him and was very disdainful. You're tuning into the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.